Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the Marin Clean Energy Board of Directors meeting for Thursday, April 3rd. Why don't we start with item 1, board announcements. Doesn't look like we have any. Item 2, public open time. Matters not on the agenda. Welcome, by the way. Item 3, report from Executive Officer Dawn.
Great, thank you. I have a couple of items this evening, and I wanted to start by introducing a couple of staff members that are here in the audience that haven't yet been introduced to our full board. So I just figured I'd take this opportunity. And actually, while we're at it, we might just introduce all the staff over there. But I'll start with our new staff, since they don't have name tags. But first of all, I'd like to introduce Allison Kirk. If you can stand up, Allison. Allison is an intern that joined us recently and has been a superstar at helping with all sorts of things. So thank you for being here tonight, Allison. And then we also have Martha, who joined our regulatory team to provide a lot of needed support to our regulatory team, doing filings with the CPUC and lots of other amazing things that we are really grateful for. So thank you for joining us and being here, Martha. And then for those of you who might not already know Megan Duran, she is supporting our energy efficiency team, helping Becky with all of our EE programs, and is a great go-to person, really great at getting stuff done, and we're so grateful to have you on the team. There's a little love thing going on. And then I'm sure you all know Greg Brem, but just in case, we have a couple new board members. This is Greg Brem, who handles a lot of our resource procurement activities. So thanks to you all for being here. And then a couple of updates I wanted to provide. First of all, I wanted to let folks know, if you aren't already aware, that there was a report released on Monday, the latest report from the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, the IPCC, which was released on Monday, and I have a few copies here, which Emily is going to pass around if folks want to flip through it. I just have 3 copies, they're kind of big, so if you're interested in looking at the whole report, Darlene can send you the link online. She has that link available, and it's a great report, I think, with a lot of current information and updates. For those of you who don't know, the IPCC is the international body for assessing the science related to climate change. It was set up in 1988 by the World Meteorological Association and the United Nations to help provide policymakers with regular assessments and scientific updates regarding climate change, its impacts, its future risks, and options for adaptation and mitigation. And a couple of things you'll see in the report include documenting some of the science regarding existing impacts of climate change that we're already seeing globally, including sea level rise, loss of Arctic ice, extreme weather events, including floods, heat waves, droughts, fires, and crop impacts, as well as impacts to ecological and social systems. So that's some of the fun, light reading that awaits you if you're interested in taking a look at this report. So I wanted to make you aware of that. We also have an article that I think is in front of you regarding Governor Brown's participation in a panel on Monday where he talked about this report. He was in a presentation in Sausalito on Monday, so that article is in front of you if you're interested in taking a look at that. And he really echoed a lot of the thoughts and sentiments that were in this report, so that was interesting to see. The next item is I wanted to provide an update on our solar rebate program. You all may recall that back in 2013, your board approved a $10,000 budget allocation to provide $500 solar rebates to MCE residential customers. Later, the board voted to restrict eligibility to the solar rebate program to low-income customers for an initial 4-month period. And that was really done in an effort to help promote solar installations that might not already be happening through households that already had resources to do those installations. And it turned out to be a really big success. And almost half of the projects, 9 projects, were installed in Richmond, 11 projects in Marin, received rebates, and we've used up all of the resources, and many of them went to low-income installations with the help of Grid Alternatives, who does a lot of work on solar installations for low-income individuals. And so it was a great partnership with them, and our rebates really helped get a lot of installations in low-income households that would not have been accomplished otherwise. So just wanted to let you all know so that we can kind of celebrate that landmark together. And that is it for my report.
Thank you, Don. Any questions, board members or members of the public? All right, great. Item 4 is the consent calendar.
I have a question.
Yes.
On a couple of items.
Absolutely.
Okay, so item 4, compensation changes for MCE positions. Just a question. A lot of those are pretty significant bumps from 17%, 53%, 33%, 46% to the top of the salary range. I was wondering if this is something that, rather than being on consent, and I'm not pulling it off, just a question, would just be, is this something that the executive committee should take a look at and perhaps see the actual surveys, determine if, just take a look at it. I'm sure they're very appropriate, but maybe
That's a great question, Barbara. We have done that through the executive committee. We've actually spent 2 sessions on it already.
Are you sure it wasn't 5?
Actually 2. I think I lowballed it by saying 2.
Okay, well that's good. I didn't know that.
That having been said, interesting that it is a consent item. Don, was there any additional work left to be done the way we left it at the last committee meeting?
No, there was one change that was recommended in the executive committee meeting, and that was incorporated into the motion to recommend the action on this item. So that's been incorporated into the proposal before you this evening.
Yeah, I can assure you, Barbara, we did spend hours and hours.
If it would have just been on the staff report, I would have even asked. I just assumed it hadn't been. And the other question I have is on the adjustments to the MCE benefit schedule. I was wondering, was this another one that the executive committee had taken up?
Yes, it is.
Okay.
In your review, did you see any particular issues?
No, it was just, I just thought it was, it's great. It's extraordinary, having worked in government for years. I thought that this was something we should have done in government. And I noticed the types of organizations that offer it are pretty extraordinary places like Google or law firms, which are probably offering as a major perk because you get to work 100 hours normally a week. And so my only question was just, is it going to change our competitiveness? Potentially, because I don't think PG&E or the other major utilities offer this.
Well, why don't we do this? I think your points are well taken. Don, if you could elaborate on the strategy and how we got to the point we're at.
Yeah, happy to do that. So as we discussed in the executive committee, the compensation and other benefits provided to our employees is designed to be really on par with what we see in the public sector. And so we did a lot of analysis over the last few months before bringing this to the executive committee regarding what is offered in other similar types of public agencies. There are agencies like water districts that actually have rate revenue, so they're structured a little different than just a local government. So those are the types of agencies we look towards when we can. We also did look at some private companies, as you might have noticed, law firms, and we looked at PG&E. They actually have some benefits along these lines, although they're a little bit different. And our proposal and recommendation to the executive committee was really to kind of maintain competitiveness with retaining employees in the current market.
Okay, thank you. Thank you.
Okay, any further questions? We've got a motion from Director Sears.
Second.
And a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? That matter carries. Item 5, MCE rates for fiscal year 2014-15.
Okay, well, this is my item. And, perfect timing. If you could hit the show on the screen there, that would be terrific. So, so this item is the, thank you, the proposed adoption of the final rates for the coming fiscal year, the fiscal year that actually started a couple of days ago on April 1st. And most of what's in this presentation will be sort of a abbreviated version of what you saw in February. And I trust that you all committed that to memory, so it will be a relatively easy item for you. But just in case you didn't, we're going to have a little bit of review here. So the rate setting cycle, the calendar, and where we are today is at the very end. Where we started in January was with developing the preliminary budget, developing the rates that would be consistent with that budget, rates that would be sufficient to recover that budget, working with the ad hoc rates committee to go over those items and also take a look at PG&E's rates that went into effect in January. So that was all the preparatory work that we did, and that culminated in the presentation and the public release of the proposed rates in February. That kicks off a public review period, which is roughly 60 days. And then in the April meeting, today's meeting, then it's before the board to adopt those rates and to make them go into effect. So that's where we are. Before we get into the MCE rates themselves, I'd like to talk a little bit about some changes to the PG&E generation rates. And the first one was the January 1 rate change, and we talked about that in February, but the increase in the PG&E generation rate was about 9%, and which was that impacted PG&E bundled customers. That didn't impact MCE customers. But what did impact MCE customers was the second item, which was a fairly significant increase in the PCIA. And I think we're all familiar with that by now, but that's the surcharge that is applied to MCE customers' bills by PG&E to essentially enable PG&E to continue to recover some of their generation costs, some of their costs that are above market. So there was a fairly sizable increase in PG&E generation rates, sizable increase in the PCIA. So on net, for our customers, it was a slight improvement. So in terms of how the cost through MCE service compares to PG&E. So that was January. And if you recall, we talked about the fact that there was another rate change coming in May, and that was related to recovery of GHG compliance cost in PG&E's generation rates. And so back in January, February, we knew that was coming. We didn't know exactly how much. We now do. So on May 1st, what will be happening is another 6% increase in PG&E's generation rates. And there won't be any real change in PCIA, so that's a good thing for our competitive position. Very slight increase in a small piece of the CCA surcharge, which is the franchise fee surcharge, but that's largely insignificant. And what's also happening, so that's the generation side of the PG&E bill, so that only is really impacting the bundled PG&E customer. On the non-generation side, which impacts MCE customers, there is a crediting of revenues that PG&E obtained through auctioning off the GHG allocation credits. So those are returned to electric customers through essentially the non-generation side of the bill. Our customers get a share of that. So bottom line is bundled customer rates of PG&E are going up on May 1st, and they're going down for MCE customers. So that's just a little bit of context. I think the relevant numbers, the most relevant numbers really are the increases in the PG&E generation rates of 9% plus 6% from last year to now, or to May 1. That's probably the most relevant figure of this information. So, that's kind of what we're competing against, right? So that's the import of that. Now we move on to MCE's proposed rates. So small numbers, but what we're showing here is really two things. One is how much revenue we project that we would receive using MCE's current rates for the fiscal year. So based on our projections of sales and customers and usage, how much revenue would we get using our current rates. And that number is about $95 million. And then the next category here is really our budget for the fiscal year. It's cast a little differently, but it's the revenue requirement. So that's how much we need to recover through MCE rates. And that total is about $102 million roughly. So there's a gap there. The gap is $6.6 million, which translates into about a 7% increase in rates to fully recover that revenue requirement. Now, why are our costs going up? What's the reason for that? It's really primarily power supply. The cost in the market for conventional energy, non-renewable energy is increasing, and we have some additional renewable portfolio standard compliance costs as well. So those two factors together are driving a higher cost for the coming fiscal year. PG&E is kind of in the same boat. The reason their rates went up by a combined 15% roughly was higher power supply costs. So on that, by that measure, our cost increase is low relative to theirs. But that's the primary reason for it. The market's been actually rather volatile. In February in particular, if you recall, there was all the cold weather in the Northeast and the Midwest and pretty much throughout the country really disrupted the energy markets, and that filtered through to California electricity prices as well. So it was a good thing that we've been very diligent about forward purchasing and making sure that we're not exposed to the market, because just in the month of February, because of the contracts that we have in place, MCE's power supply costs were about $2 million lower than they would be if MCE was just buying on the market. So that's it's just an indication that energy prices are increasing. MCE has contracts in place to protect itself from those large fluctuations, but even with those contracts in place, power supply costs are going up, and so that translates into a need for this year anyway to increase rates. So in terms of so that's the revenue requirement. That's on a sort of program-wide basis. The need to adjust rates, and then we get into the various rate schedules that we have. We have some 30 different rate schedules, and the proposal, and this is no change from what we talked about in February, but the proposal is simply to increase all the rates by that same percentage. It's a 7% across the board. That keeps the relative differences the same. It supports some of the policies that we have in regards to stability, equity, and basically also maintaining the relative competitiveness to the PG&E rate. So that's the proposal. Again, no change from what we discussed in February. Now, I showed a slightly different version of this table at the initial proposal, and what it does is it shows how do MCE's costs compare to what PG&E charges, essentially, for the different types of customers that we have. And what I've done is updated this for the new rates that will be in effect for May 1 for PG&E, and the new rates that will be in effect, assuming you adopt them, starting essentially tomorrow. And so bottom line is that overall, this number here, customers in aggregate would be paying about almost $6 million less because they're MCE customers than they would through PG&E. So this is a little bit of a change from what we saw in February, because in February we didn't have that May 1 increase. We didn't know what that was. We now know what it is, so we're able to compare to that. So this is a very good good news. Essentially, for almost all of our customer classes, total cost through MCE is lower than what they would be if they were PG&E bundled service customers. The only exception here is the traffic control, which is a little bit higher, and that's because of the PCIA. But the other thing to note is customers are saving almost $6 million, and that's despite this payment to PG&E of $13.7 million for the fiscal year. In aggregate, our customers will be paying $13.7 million through these various surcharges to PG&E. So I think it's actually remarkable that we can sort of overcome that hurdle and still have lower costs for customers. And I think that's a very good outcome for the agency this year. So in conclusion, this is kind of short and sweet, but that we recommend that the board approve the proposed rates for the 2014-15 fiscal year. And with that, I'm happy to take any questions.
So the framework for this is we're now at the end of the 90-day review period? Is that
Yeah,
right?
it's roughly a 60-day, and we're at the end of that. We really didn't receive any public comment.
That was going to be my
Yeah.
question. Okay. And we got word out, obviously, through a public process. And
That's correct. So, Jamie, I think, could you explain sort of the notices that were provided?
We did public notices in the Pacific Sun, the Marin IHA, the Marin Scope newspapers, the West Contra Costa Times, and we also did an on-bill message for all of our customers, notifying them of the rate increase. And then we updated all of the rate pages on our website with that information. So we've got a residential rate page, a commercial rate page, and then an overall rate page that shares all of the PG&E cost comparisons for each of our customer classes. And it was on all of those sites. And we got very minimal feedback from the public about the rate change.
okay. Well, it seems to be overall good news, but why don't we...
Quick question, John. The 13.7 million surcharge number you mentioned, is that primarily or all the PCIA surcharges, or is there something else in that as well?
The vast majority of it, there is a little bit in there there's two surcharges. PCIA is the big one, and then there's a franchise fee surcharge that is included in that number, but that's relatively small. I don't know the exact number, but it's probably a couple hundred. A couple million. It would be surprising if it wasn't that much, but yeah, $1 million or less.
Director O'Donnell.
The higher cost of power, is that mainly due to the fact that the percentage of renewable power in the portfolio is going up, or is it due to the fact that in the long-term contracts there are escalators that kicked in this year?
Yeah, it's primarily due to a step up in the contract price for power that's being purchased through the Shell agreement. So that is a fixed price contract through the end of 2017, but each year there's a different price, and so there's a step up that's going to occur in July of this year in that agreement. So that's part of it. And then on the renewable side, we do have some renewable projects that new projects that we contracted for in the past that are going to be coming online. And so that has a little bit of a upward pressure on the rate. And then the regulatory requirements have changed. Starting in 2014, we're required to have more of the so-called bucket one renewables. If you remember kind of the bucket 1, 2, 3, bucket 1 is the most expensive. And the proportion of bucket 1 that we need to be compliant with the renewable portfolio standards requirement, that's increased in 2014, in 2015 as well. So that plays into it as well.
Just a general question. Is it a true statement if the cost of renewable power continues to decrease as more power comes online, that the PCA is just going to increase? Is there a relative ratio that's always going to happen?
There is, in the short term, there is it would be true if the cost of market power, just what you can get energy for, forget renewables, or just market power. If that decreases, then the PCI would increase. It's really just a comparison. I mean, the calculation of the PCIA is what is PG&E's generation cost, and how does that compare to market? And that market is determined sort of administratively through formula, a market price benchmark. So if that benchmark is lower, that means more of their portfolio is above market, and therefore the PCIA is increased. Now, over the longer term, that's not necessarily true, because the generation costs that are subject to stranded cost recovery through the PCIA, those start to tail off, right? It's kind of set at one point in time when the customer becomes an MCE customer. It's a certain subset of the contracts and resources that PG&E has. And so as those may be long dated, so this may be, when we're talking about long term, it may really be long term, 10, 20 years. But over time, those should start to fall off. So that would be, independent of what's happening in the market.
Further questions or comments, members of the public? Okay, I'd entertain a motion.
Second.
Have a motion and second. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? That matter carries. Good work, John and Kirby. Very encouraging news. Okay, item 6, 100% local solar program.
Oh, yeah, no, I'll do that. All right.
You can say something useful.
Not-
There you go.
Okay, so this item here, the 100% local solar program, really MCE has talked about a program like this for quite some time, and I think, if I'm recalling correctly, this dates back to the very first board retreat that this agency had in August of 2010.
Was this solar shares?
Well, that was one of the programs that we discussed at that particular retreat, and it's one of the programs that we'll refer to here in this presentation as well as an example that was referenced when thinking about this program and how it might be constructed for MCE. In any case, just some general comments on this particular program. The whole concept behind a 100% local solar program or a solar cooperative, whatever you want to call it, is really providing a voluntary opportunity for our customers to go out and directly support a locally situated renewable generator, and in this case a solar generator. The product that they would be purchasing through a program like this would have really 3 key features. One, it'd be a new project. 2, it's 100% local, so situated entirely within the service territory of MCE. And then the third piece is that it would be solar, and solar alone. So that's really separate and distinct from our light green option and our deep green option. Of course, deep green is 100% renewable as well, but it's really kind of a different type of product. It's designed to be not only green and environmentally responsible, but also very cost competitive. And you'll find as we work through the material here that this particular program would be more expensive, and significantly more expensive, in fact. And one of the key elements of this type of program, one of the benefits that it provides customers is it eliminates barriers that are typically associated with putting photovoltaic solar on residences or businesses, various other structures. Considerations like shading or rooftop orientation, the fact that you may not own the structure as a renter or a lessor of a particular facility, you may not be able to put these types of projects on the roof space. And then also tariff volatility is something that we'll talk about a little bit later, and how this type of program can really eliminate that through more of a fixed price over a longer term for participating customers. John just referred to this in his presentation, the idea that this particular product that would be sold to customers would be a bundled renewable energy product. So the customer would receive both the electric energy as well as the renewable attribute. Those 2 items, those 2 products would be produced contemporaneously. And there's been a lot of discussion about the use of RECs and unbundled RECs. And with regard to this product, this would be a bundled product. So no separation of the renewable attribute and the electric energy. Participation under this type of program would be limited. We'd be looking to use potentially a feed-in tariff project as the basis for this type of program. And so there would be a limited amount of electric output from that particular facility. And that facility, that electric output would be sold off at about a rate of 90% of total production. So we make sure that we don't oversell the program, because I think that would that would be very problematic. We got ourselves into a situation where we overcommitted ourselves from a sales perspective. And at the end of the day, total participatory numbers for this type of program, rather limited, but I think still very meaningful in that we could accommodate anywhere from about 150 to 300 typical residential customers through this type of program. I mentioned the feed-in tariff relationship and the fact that the energy price charged to customers under this sort of program would be directly related to the feed-in tariff price that we pay. So this would be a way of kind of passing through that type of structure to our customers. And then, of course, the PG&E delivery charges would continue to apply, just like they do with the other service options that MCE provides. Director Connolly, you mentioned solar shares, and this was one of the primary programs that was really studied as an example of how we might be able to do this. That particular program is offered by the Sacramento Municipal Utility District. It's really been a wildly successful program. It was fully subscribed in a matter of months. It's been fully subscribed ever since, and they've had a lot of success marketing and having robust customer support for that program through a 1 megawatt solar array that's located in the southern area of Sacramento County. And we also looked at a similar program that the Tucson Electric Power administers in Arizona. A little bit different administratively, but the same idea. Local project with output sold off directly to customers at a premium price, allowing them to support the development of local solar projects. So obviously here we've got a situation, I think, when renewable energy, additional renewable energy is in play, this is really consistent with the overall overarching goals and objectives of MCE. And as you can imagine, bringing a program like this in play is a great way really to increase the amount of renewable energy that is being sold to our customers, while also providing a really nice economic development opportunity for local solar developers. And then and another choice. I think, CCA in and of itself provides a choice, but I think it's also a really nice feature that this agency provides in offering multiple different retail service options for its customers. And so this would be really a complementary option to light green and deep green service that already exists. And then one of the key features, I think, that this particular program could offer is long-term rate or price stability for participating customers. You may be aware that under our feed-in tariff program, we enter into long-term 20-year agreements with local solar or renewable energy developers, and that price remains fixed over the entirety of that 20-year term. And so under this type of program, we would really have the flexibility and the option to pass through that long-term price stability to participating customers in such a way that over time, they might actually realize a cost benefit. And of course, this wouldn't be a near-term effect that they would see. But over a period of years, if they were to stick with this program, this is really kind of the promise of renewable energy, generally speaking. For over a longer-term horizon, you can actually be competitive, if not beat, conventional energy pricing. We've talked about this a lot with the technical committee. I think we've had a lot of fun. We've kind of gone around and around and iterated on this and come up with some fine-tuning along the way. And I think we're very excited about the proposal that we have for you to consider this evening. Mention the relationship to the feed-in tariff and the fact that there is that tie to long-term rate and cost stability. And there also may be an opportunity by linking this to the feed-in tariff program and supporting that higher price that we pay by customer participation in this, that we might be able to prolong that price offer through our feed-in tariff program to promote additional renewable energy projects developed here within MCE service territory. So I think that's something very interesting to consider as well. So how does this relate to Deep Green, just as a point of comparison? Well, both programs are 100% renewable, and really that's, I think, where the similarities kind of stop, if you will. Program location with regard to the local solar program is obviously 100% within MCE service territory, as opposed to our Deep Green program, which, while still being 100% renewable, draws from a broader base, geographic base, with regard to the resources that support that particular program. There are different certifications for the renewable energy that are in play for each one of these different options. The solar program would be entirely renewable portfolio standard certified, while the Deep Green program relies on the Green Energy product certification. Both are very high standards, but I think that is a distinction that's noteworthy. One of the other things that I think is really key about the local solar program is the fact that we would be supporting, the participating customers would be supporting a new resource, something that would likely be developed within the next, say, 12 to 24 months. The Green E certification that applies to our Deep Green product also utilizes new resources, but there is kind of a more extended definition of newness, if you will, for the Green E certification that is a little bit different. As far as the fuel source, our Deep Green program, 100% wind, this would be 100% solar. And then the cost, I want to make sure that we're very clear on this. This would be a significant premium. So roughly 5 times the premium amount that would typically be incurred by a Deep Green customer. So if you're used to paying an extra $5 a month for Deep Green, you'd be paying about $25 extra for the local solar program. So on the go, we've already touched on a lot of these items, so I'll kind of go through them quickly. Participation would be limited. We make sure that we wouldn't oversell the program by limiting the output sold to about 90% of the expected production from the facility that's being used. Pricing and cost considerations, again, significant premium. I don't want to leave that stone unturned, but you do get a lot for that money that you pay. And I think one of the key pieces of the puzzle is the rate or price stability that you would essentially be getting through that relationship to that 20-year feed-in tariff contract that would underlie the resource. So the proposal as it sits now is a 3-year fixed price essentially for participating customers. And towards the end of that 3-year term, the price would be reviewed in the event that there were increased administrative costs related to the program. There might be upwards adjustments, but the idea would be to keep that price as stable as we could over the long term, beyond that 3-year term. And then one of the other items that's down on the bottom there is that I think it's important to reserve the right to impose an early termination fee. This is something that the Sacramento Municipal Utility District does. If you back out within the first 12 months, they charge you $100. Now, I'm not saying that we should do something like that. They run their program a little bit differently than we would here. But I think it's important to keep in mind that we really don't want customers jumping in and out of this type of program, because we are making an investment and bearing a cost as a service provider to support this type of project. And so we really want customer stability. And I think to the extent that we have a waiting list, and I suspect that we will, that termination fee would never even apply. And so we'll give that some thought over the next year, but it's something that really wouldn't be in place from the get-go. I think economic development, we've already touched on that enough. As far as the reconciliation process, making sure that customers are comfortable knowing that they're getting what they're paying for here. This is something that we would go through on a monthly as well as an annual basis, tracking customer energy use relative to production at the facility, and then reporting back to you as the board on an annual basis, making sure that you all know that we're only selling off what we have to sell and no more, and making sure that we track that over time so that customer participation in this, there's a high level of confidence related to that participation. And in terms of the billing, this may actually be an advantage for some customers in the sense that the rate associated with the solar program would replace their otherwise applicable rate. And so with customers with time of use schedules where multiple rates apply over multiple periods of time or hours of the day, you would just have one rate with this particular item. So it might simplify the presentation of the bill. And so I think that is something that might be nice for some folks and might actually represent a cost savings depending on the time of day that certain customers use energy. So how does it compare to our broader array of program options? Well, you can see here for a typical residential customer, Jamie was good enough to put these comparisons together for us. And you can see, you know, for a typical residential customer that uses about 500 kilowatt hours a month, you're looking at about a $25 cost relative to incremental cost relative to what you'd otherwise pay. Similar for a, let's see here, commercial customer. A little bit more there. This is, I believe, an A1 commercial customer, 1,200 kilowatt hours a month. And you can see again, it's a pretty considerable cost impact relative to both the light green and the deep green options. But again, a very specific product that's being purchased and a product that typically comes at a significant premium price. So as far as next steps go, Jamie, I don't know if you want to talk about this at all, or if you want me to keep going.
Either way, I'm happy to.
Go ahead.
Okay. We didn't talk about it beforehand. So obviously, the first step will be to monitor, any future feed-in tariff projects and locate our source for where we will be getting this local solar. Once we identify a likely project site, we can move forward with offering the program to people. But before that, we can start on some preliminary marketing. So we're going to start with creating a page on our website. That'll be launched in May, along with the revised website. You might remember from approving a contract, that might have even been last month, with Marin Web Design to redesign our website. So as part of that, we'll be adding a third option for our customers. I'm really excited to be offering 3 different options. So everyone in our service area has 4 choices now, which is really exciting. We will market this program through our e-newsletter that goes out to people who sign up for it. So it's over 4,000 people right now. We'll be marketing it on our social media pages. We can do direct outreach to our deep green customers who we know have already expressed interest in 100% renewable energy. One thing that's not on here that I think is going to be really important and will be very valuable for disseminating information about this program is earned media. We'll definitely be doing press releases, and this is really new and exciting, and it's the first time we're offering anything like this in Marin and Richmond, so I'm hoping to see a lot of information in the press. We can also create an early interest form. Kirby was mentioning that earlier on in the presentation, so that we can tell people about this program, letting them know that it's going to be offered in the next several months, and they can sign up and let us know that they're interested. We can continue the conversation with them that way, let them know when we find a site for the solar project, and that'll make sure that the program isn't oversold, so that we can make sure and limit it to the customers that are able to sign up for it. And one thing that also isn't on this slide that we are working on right now is determining a program name. So that is a really important component of marketing. We definitely want to have a great name for this third service option. And that involves a lot of objective analysis, trademark searches to make sure that the name isn't already taken, and finding something that's fun and memorable and distinctive and stands out from the rest, and has a lot of depth and personality. So you'll be hearing more about that in the coming weeks.
So just to recap, our feed-in tariff queue right now is active, so we do have prospective projects that are being evaluated and are working their way through the development process. The initial price that's being proposed for this particular product option would be 14.2 cents a kilowatt hour, and that would be fixed initially over a 3-year term. So participating customers would enjoy that rate stability over that 3-year term. And that price, again, is based on our feed-in tariff rate, which is currently at 13.8 cents, plus a 4 mil or 4/10 of a cent adder on top of that for administration, marketing, and so on and so forth. So it is directly tied here to the feed-in tariff program.
So that's really driving the additional cost.
It is, correct. Yeah, this is truly designed to be a pass-through to the customer. So what we pay, they pay. And this is truly our cost in the sense that it's what we pay for the electric energy plus what we pay to administer the program, and that's exactly what we charge them. So it's intended to be very transparent in that regard. And without further ado, I'll just mention that staff's recommendation is to approve the proposed program parameters and authorize us to kind of initiate some initial marketing efforts.
Yes, Bob.
Kirby, as much as I like this project and the idea, but I confess to continue to be mystified as why many of our deep green customers would opt for this alternative, given the significant increase in price. But let me get, that's not my real question, because I also noticed that the two areas you note where a similar program has been offered, Sacramento and Tucson, I'm guessing that they don't have local CCAs that offer deep green. But my real question is, if this doesn't sell, if we don't have enough, as many customers opt for it as we're expecting, what's the financial risk to us, if any?
Yeah, great questions. Hopefully I've got some great answers. So the first response, so what's the impact to the agency if we don't get the participation that we would like to get? And I think the answer to that is nothing. And the reason is because our integrated resource plan has adopted a 10 megawatt feed-in tariff cap or limit. And currently we only have 1 megawatt under contract. So we have committed to buying this resource type at this price already. So there would be no incremental impact, if you will. And then you also asked a question about programs elsewhere and how those programs kind of fit in with maybe other products that are offered by those other utilities. And in the case of the Sacramento Municipal Utility District, much like MCE, they have a kind of their equivalent to Deep Green, which is called Greenergy. And then they also have Solar Shares, which is their equivalent to the program that we're proposing here. And they have robust participation in both of those programs.
And their solar share is significantly more expensive than their deep green alternative?
Correct, absolutely, yeah. So they've found, and I think in my brief discussions with them, that choice, retail choice in terms of the electric energy products that they offer their customers is a good thing. And it turns out that in spite of the fact that there is a less expensive green energy option that they provide, there was tremendous participation and support in this particular program. And I think it's also noteworthy, didn't we talk about offering this product first to deep green customers? Is that still something we're considering doing?
That was something that was suggested by the technical committee, and I think that's something that we should still consider.
Yeah.
I would also add that I think we might see a lot of participation from customers who aren't in deep green for this program, which I think would be a good thing, and that sort of avoids having one clean energy customer move to another clean energy product, 100% renewable, one 100% renewable customer to another 100% renewable. And I think this, this program might be more appealing to a slightly different market of customers who might not have signed up for deep green yet because they've really been waiting for something that's more local or that is local. It's something that we've been hearing since before we ever started MCE. And I have heard from some people who, haven't chose deep green that they wanted a local option and that was most important to them.
Director Butt.
It's okay. All right. I just have a question about, I also love the program, so I want to pick up the pickaxe here a little bit.
Sure.
Take a whack a little bit. So does the customer have to worry about the performance of the system itself?
No, they don't. And that's something that is really dealt with within the construct of our feed-in tariff power purchase agreement, where there are performance guarantees. And I think really one of the main reasons to tie a program like this to a technology like photovoltaic solar is just the general reliability, the very high level of reliability for that type of technology.
So like when a customer puts solar on his own roof, he gets a sort of a performance guarantee based on his angle, shading, et cetera, and what the likely output would be, usually the weather, and et cetera. In this case, does the customer also, since he's buying a block of this particular facility, also have to worry about that, or is there some sort of a performance guarantee that is provided by MCE?
Yeah, I think the answer to that question is yes. And that yes, MCE is saying that if you participate in this customer, this program as a customer, you will get 100% locally produced solar energy. And part of the reason that we can make that guarantee is by selling less than the fully expected output, which is typically understated anyway. So when we say that we'll only sell 90%, well, that may wind up really being more like, 80% of the total output. So I think there are protections in place. We could withstand quite a lot of variability in production and still deliver to these customers that would participate in this program. And I'm very confident that we would deliver on that promise.
Okay, so the second question is, 3 years locking in the price doesn't seem to be such a great deal for the customer when out in the solar market today, you're looking at high installation costs and whatnot, but you're projecting out far longer than 3 years for your cost recovery, and there's always a sort of a graph that where you're going to reach a point where you're going to start recouping some of your quote-unquote investment. And it seems to me 3 years just giving a price that's 30, 40, 50% higher than light green, and then no guaranteed beyond the 3 years, it's kind of a problematic thing. So I'd like to sort of address that.
Yeah, fair point. I think the goal of this particular program would be to leave that price fixed over the duration of the 20-year term associated with that feed-in tariff project. That would be the goal. But I think in the event that we did incur marketing costs that were unexpected to, say, fill gaps in participation or something like that, I think it's more reserving the right to make changes and reviewing the costs periodically in light of those costs that might pop up. There's really no direct intent to change the price every 3 years. I think the goal is to leave it fixed. And I suppose that, that's something that we could discuss if need be, is do we push that out to 5 years? Do we push that out, longer initially? I think that the idea is, at least in my mind, that 3 years is a long enough period of time to give a participating customer peace of mind that things aren't going to bounce around every 6 months or a year for that matter. And with really the intent of MCE to leave that price fixed over the longer term so that they could share in that stability associated with the 20-year term. So,
You might want that in writing.
Yeah, and I think that's something that we could certainly spec out in greater detail, so that's more clearly understood. Because I hear what you're saying, and I agree that when you look at a contract that's fixed for 20 years and you're willing to provide 3-year certainty, those time frames are different, and maybe that's a cause for concern. But I think that the goal is to leave that price fixed for as long a period of time as we possibly can. So.
And this is my last question, so if I'm monopolizing the question here. Why are we giving the rep to the customer? Why is that an important element as opposed to MCE retaining the rep? Because I see small scale, sort of a residential house, what would they be able to do with that rep?
Yeah.
So maybe you can sort of answer that question.
Sure. So, in practical terms, the customer won't get the rec. They would need to set up a specific account to do that, and we would need to transfer the rec to them, and it'd be a real administrative nightmare. I think it's more symbolic in the sense that we will be the custodian of that rec or recs for them, and we will retire those certificates on their behalf as a participant in this program. And we will track that separately on our power content labels and whatnot. So there is a clear and direct tie between those certificates, the manner in which they're tracked in our account. So will be a separate sub-account that will be, the recs will be retired in on the customer's behalf. And we'll continue to do that so long as the customer's participating in the program. So again, it really is symbolic. The certificates will not be transferred directly to the customer. They'll be maintained by MCE, retired on the customer's behalf, and reported really on the customer's behalf in our various reporting obligations that exist.
Director Lyon.
What are the downside risks on this whole proposal? It sounds like you've got a lot of things covered, but where are the exposures of it?
Yeah, you know, I think, I suppose we could expend funds marketing the program and have low uptake and you know, bear a cost without any, with less participatory benefit than we expected. You know, to me, I see the risk as being more of a constraint in the sense that I see participation and interest in participation being much higher than we have room for. That's the risk that I see.
Who do you see particularly being interested in this kind of program? Like
I think this to Jamie's point, I think this really answers a key question for a lot of customers about, you know, really creating a tie between MCE and locally generated renewable energy and being able to participate in that directly. And so I think there are customers probably now sitting on the sidelines, satisfied with their light green option, that are waiting for something like this to come along so that they can connect themselves with a local renewable project. And I think, you know, that's something that, you know, we haven't had so far. Yeah, I don't know if that.
Can I add on to that? Because to me, I think the fact that it's local is important, but in addition to that, people who participate in this program are really enabling the creation of a new local project. So they're supporting the expansion of renewable energy with the additional benefit that it's local renewable energy. And I really think that that's going to be attractive for a lot of our residents. As a number of people have said, it does go back for a long time in this organization. People are really feeling strongly about the energy and the power that we sell to customers being local. But I think the opportunity to be at the forefront of someone who is contributing to the development of a new power, renewable energy source right within our service area is worth a lot to people. I think that's going to resonate.
Director Pat?
I'm still having trouble understanding the numbers. So currently our feed-in tariff is about 14 cents a kilowatt hour.
Correct.
And we're selling deep green for about 9 cents or so a kilowatt hour, right?
Yeah, it depends on.
So how are we buying a lot of power a lot cheaper to make that? How do you get from, we must be buying a lot of power at a lot less than 8 cents a kilowatt hour to be able to resell it for 8 or 9, right?
Absolutely, yeah. A lot of that has to do with the location of the resources.
Okay, all right, so that, now I understand that. Now, if somebody puts, and I should know this if anybody should, but I don't. If somebody puts photovoltaics on their own house and takes advantage of tax credits and takes out a loan and has debt service and all that, what ballpark, what are they going to be paying per kilowatt hour?
Wow, okay, so that could be all over the map depending on how they decide to procure that. So if they buy the system, just outright pay
buy it
cash.
outright, get the tax credits, get the rebates, own it, you know, and get the power.
Yeah, it'd be great if we had a solar developer sitting here to correct me now, but you know, I think you'd probably be looking at something in the 10.5, 11.5, maybe 12-cent range potentially. Yeah.
And so this is looked at as a substitute for somebody that likes the idea of owning their own generator, but for some physical reason they can't do it. As you said, you gave us a list of reasons before.
Right. One thing though I would like to point out, and it kind of got glossed over, I think. It was back on the very first slide with content on it. And right there, tariff volatility. So when I take my $15,000 and I go buy my solar array and I put it on my roof, I have no idea what the utility is going to do after that. Rates are going to go up, rates are going to go down, there might be fixed charges that I incur as a customer that cut into the benefits that I expected to receive when I originally put that solar project on my roof. Those are risks that the customer takes, and oftentimes they don't hear about those risks when they're going through the decision-making process, doing an installation like that. Now, I think there are a lot of very informed consumers out there that are aware of those items, and maybe they take them into consideration. Maybe they don't. Maybe they just want the renewable energy on the roof regardless. But here, we're eliminating that risk. We're saying we're going to fix that price. There's not going to be any exposure on that front, which is something that they can't guarantee when they.
Here's what I don't understand. If I'm and let's forget being a renter for a minute, but if I'm a homeowner and I'm really interested in this concept, I've got several options. One of them is I can buy my own system, put it on my own roof, own it, pay for it with cash or amortize it or whatever. And so you're saying that the rate I would be paying might be 10 or 11 cents. Well, let's just say, let's just use that as, I mean, I don't know if it really is, but that's what you put out. So 10 or 11 cents. So I've got that choice. Or I can buy light green from MCE and pay 8 cents for it. Or I can buy deep green from MCE, pay 9 cents for it. Or I can join this sort of a cooperative and pay 15 cents for it. Or I can contract with somebody like Solar City, who offers sort of a PPA and pay less than what I'd have to pay PG&E for it right now. I don't see where the incentive is. I don't know why anybody would want to do this unless it's, I mean, it sounds kind of like community-supported agriculture to me. It's like, you're going to pay $30 a week for somebody to bring you a box of produce and you really feel good about it, even though you could go buy that same box at the grocery store for $15. Man, I don't understand it. I don't know why anybody would do this. I certainly wouldn't.
And I think, to be totally fair, I think that opinion represents a certain subset of MCE customers. Yeah. And that, I think, to me, that only reinforces that we want to provide more choices, quite frankly, because there will be people on the other side of that equation that will say, I rent, I don't own, I can't put something on my roof like this, even if I wanted to. So this provides an option to do that. I've got shading over my house and I don't want to take out trees. Maybe I have roof space that's already allocated to something. There's a whole range of considerations that come into play. And, I think that this is just one of now 4 options potentially.
Well, if there's a market out there and people want to buy it, then, God bless you. But I'd have a hard time making a sales.
Kirby, will it stay with the meter or will it stay with the individual that makes the choice?
If they move, they can take this with them. It is transferable.
I just have a quick follow-up question on what Emma was talking about earlier, and that's getting back to being able to depend on the rate. Because when you talked about potential rate increases 3 years down the road, you're talking about more the administrative component. So why couldn't that tariff rate be set for the 20 years and that only that other small administrative component would be the piece that might fluctuate? I mean, that would be more of a guarantee to the customer. And if what you said to me is that it's pretty much guaranteed for 20 years, then if that's not really true, if it's true, you should be able to say it and commit to it, or it's not true.
Yeah, I don't think we really ever considered looking at those 2 items separately.
I mean, because the majority of the cost is that tariff rate.
Absolutely.
And the administrative is very, very small. So if the customer is looking at an increase in 3 years, if they know it could possibly only happen in that very small percentage, then the overall cost to them is going to be minimal.
Yeah, and I agree.
I mean, that's what I would clarify when you talk about an increase.
Yeah, heck, I wish I came up with that idea myself. But I think that's really, I think that's a great way of doing it, and I think there's no reason we couldn't do it that way. We do know what the price is going to be for that power for a 20-year period of time, and as long as your board is comfortable doing something like that, we certainly have the option to do it that way.
Well, you're telling me it's set for 20 years, so that's why if that's true, then.
It is, yeah.
Well, you know, the technical committee loves to discuss this program, and we could certainly have another session of talking about some of these rate alternatives, if that would be helpful before the board. I mean, you know, we don't have a real timing crunch on this. If it would be helpful.
Yeah, I think something maybe to consider that, subject to additional discussion, would be adopting that initial rate, so that we could go out and communicate with customers.
Because you do want to start communicating.
And then take the time between now and when we have a true product to sell in a project that's been designated, to fine tune these elements that you raised. I do think that's important. But I think this would allow us, if we did adopt this initial 14.2 cent rate, and we're able to fold that into communications and engage customer interest based on something that was pretty specific, I think that would be helpful if you all are comfortable with that.
And the only other comment I wanted to make is that in Marin, where there are a significant number of trees, I mean, there are many homes and communities that there's no way they could put solar on their roof. And there are many people who are very much interested, the same way they will go and pay a premium for organic, local organic, they will pay a premium for local solar energy. And I know many in my community don't have access to put solar because there's too many trees, which we cherish. So I don't think you're going to have difficulty filling this program. Thank you.
Director Athens.
Just for clarification purposes. So this is a way of people getting 100% solar on the grid, but they don't have to generate it themselves. They don't have to put the project on their homes and the whole bit. But they basically will become solar recipients.
Purchasers, yeah.
Purchasers.
Of local.
Okay, so people, I know, like my assistant, for instance, her purpose right now, she's talking to people, solar companies. And her sole purpose in doing that is to save money. So I think people associate, when they put solar in their home or do anything with the potential of saving money or selling it back to people, selling the excess that they have on their home back somewhere. And so obviously this is totally different than that, and that would be Jamie's job to try and explain that to people, that they're getting the benefit of having solar without having to put solar panels on their roof or wherever else, right?
Right.
Okay. So as you were mentioning that we have the availability of doing, 10 megawatt? What is it, megawatt, kilowatt? What is it?
Up to 10 megawatts.
10 megawatts, and right now we have one.
We have one, correct.
So as we develop the other 9 that we have the potential to do we have a potential for that cost to go down?
Yeah, the way that the feed-in tariff is drafted right now, there are predetermined steps downward in price over time. And just like any of the other programs that are administered by this agency, we evaluate those programs from time to time, make sure that we're sending the appropriate price signals to local developers and that the prices that we pay are in line with the development costs and the risks that are being taken by them. And so I think the feed-in tariff is another program that will undergo those same periodic reviews. But as written right now, there are planned steps downward over time. And any relationship between subsequent feed-in tariff projects and this program, that would kind of need to be addressed down the road.
So there is a possibility of prices going down.
Yeah, but I think it's important to kind of disconnect the downward trajectory of prices that have been written under our feed-in tariff and what may go on in this program, at least temporarily, until we see what's.
Well, my only concern for that is that because we have such a small amount right now compared to what we want to be, if we put a fixed rate on it, you know, sometimes a fixed rate isn't an advantage unless you think that the prices are going to escalate. Then it's a great thing. But if you have a fixed rate without the potential of taking advantage of a decrease, how is that beneficial to a customer?
Yeah, so I think here what we're really talking about right now is we're talking about a base electric rate, so our light green rate or PG&E's rate, which has really had a consistent upward trajectory over time. And so what we're doing is pegging the rate of a alternative energy program relative to a rate that's escalating over time. And so the feed-in tariff, the price schedule that's in the feed-in tariff, that's really kind of like a wholesale price schedule, and this is a retail price schedule, so I'm gonna disconnect the two for a minute. And the idea with the feed-in tariff price schedule is that the downward steps in price were essentially intended to recognize technological improvements that we expect to occur over time in various renewable technologies, and just general efficiencies in the marketplace, familiarity with the tariff itself, and development opportunities. And, you know, so far, the price really, I don't think, has been the barrier to development. It's been more the process, but the price is what draws people in and really creates the interest in trying to overcome those challenges as much as anything. And so, you know, again, I don't, it may not address what you're getting at specifically, because it has taken, you know, this agency's almost been serving customers now for 4 years, and we have the one feed-in tariff project. So, you know, I don't think this is a situation where we'll really need to address this necessarily overnight. We'll have time, and I think, as we've done with many other programs, you know, we may need to think of a creative way to blend the price, reduce the price for participating customers to the extent that there are other projects that support this program. Right now, you know, this is just being contemplated as a 1 megawatt standalone kind of pilot program, if you will. And then we'll figure out over time how this grows or doesn't grow based on participation. I think we'll find out pretty quickly, based on the level of interest, whether or not there's something more than this initial megawatt.
Thank you.
Question. Any further questions or comments? Okay, hearing none. You're requesting action at this point?
Yeah, so I think the requested action, hopefully I'm characterizing this right, would be to approve the proposed program parameters subject to further discussion and refinement with the technical committee. And I think, you know, this would show up at a future board meeting with some refinements related to the durability, if you will, of the price that would be offered. But what I think is important to do tonight is approve, to the extent that you're comfortable with them, the initial price and the terms that we've discussed, so that Jamie and her team can go out and get a better sense for the interest that exists, and then we'll work on refining the details with the technical committee going forward.
Someone like to make a motion?
I'll move.
Do I have a second? Okay, moved and seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? That matter carries. Big step.
Yeah, thanks.
Okay, item 7, addition of members to MCE Technical Committee.
Great, so this item will be very brief. We have an open seat on our technical committee, and one of our newest board members has requested or expressed an interest in being on that committee. Fortunately, he's not here this evening to defend himself, but he did put his name in the hat, I promise. This is Director Kevin Haroff, and he would like to be part of the technical committee. And he actually showed up to our last technical committee just to sit in to demonstrate his real interest and enthusiasm. So the request is to add him to the formal technical committee going forward.
Since he's not here, anything else we can You don't need to figure it out. Discussion, looks like we'll be ready for a motion.
Yeah, I'll move. I think Kevin's a great addition to the technical
Absolutely.
committee. We vetted him, he vetted us, it was all good.
Good,
Yeah.
good, excellent. All in favor?
Aye.
That matter carries unanimously. Thank you. Item 8, request for MCE membership from the City of San Pablo.
Yeah, so I'll take this item. This is something that we've kind of all known was in the hopper for many months now, and but I'm going to kind of take a step back just to remind folks of some of the discussion we've had leading up to this and what we're considering this evening. So really, for the last couple of years, MCE has been looking at the possibility of expanding to additional service territories, and really the rationale behind that was to create a bigger impact on climate change in line with our founding mission, getting more renewables onto the grid, getting more energy efficiency programs available to customers, and both of those things really leading to some additional impacts on climate change. The expansion to the city of Richmond was extremely successful, and after that had concluded, we took up the discussion around additional expansion at our fall retreat last year. And what resulted from those discussions was a policy 007 on expansion, and also a process that your board adopted for affiliate membership process. And just to remind folks of kind of the breakdown of policy 007, what was designated as 2 membership approaches for different types of communities. So because we had experience with adding a community that was nearby and the size of Richmond, we set up the affiliate membership process for communities that were within 30 miles of our jurisdiction and that had a projected customer base no larger than the size of Richmond, which is 40,000. So that's what you'll see in the policy and the affiliate membership process, which is attached to your staff report if you're interested in kind of looking back at that earlier decision. Another need that has become very evident, was evident last year, but I think even more so now, is really a need for broader support on a regional and statewide level for CCA issues. We spend a lot of time fighting the fight for CCA issues, and being the only CCA has taken its toll, and it's been difficult to gain traction in the legislative arena and the CPUC arena in some fronts. I think we've made a lot of progress, but greater numbers would have a big impact on our efforts on those fronts as well. So that's another reason that kind of went into the expansion policy. So we, as many of you know, we are supporting efforts for other CCAs to launch around the state, and we're really excited to see Sonoma Clean Power getting ready to launch on May 1st, right around the corner here, just to the north of us, and their program is looking really exciting, and that's going to have an impact, I think, on our voice, our collective voice at the CPUC and at the legislature. And there are other communities that are exploring CCA. For smaller communities, joining an existing CCA program is much more logical, and rather than starting their own. So in recent months, there have been 2 small regions interested in MCE membership. One area is the North Bay, and the request from the North Bay has been from the County of Napa. That study is underway, as you know, and will actually be presenting results on the membership study in Napa at our upcoming technical committee meeting. We'll be bringing it back to the full board next month. And then the other region, small region, that has expressed an interest in a number of communities actually is the East Bay. So, of course, we're already serving customers in the East Bay through Richmond, but there are a few other small cities that have expressed an interest in becoming part of kind of the East Bay region that we're serving. And those include the city of Albany, where a membership request has already come in and been approved by your board. So that one is already kind of in the process. But the one that's coming to you tonight is right nearby, and it's the city of San Pablo. So that's the one we're going to be talking about tonight. So I want to turn your attention to the map that's in the staff report, and so you can kind of get a sense, for those of you who don't know, some of you probably are very aware of where San Pablo is, but in case you aren't, this map gives you a sense of where San Pablo is located. And I think the other thing that's really interesting in looking at this map is that you can see that San Pablo is really surrounded both on the top and the bottom and on the sides by our existing jurisdiction of Richmond. So the community of San Pablo, although it's only 3 square miles, it would allow a connection geographically to a region that we're already serving. So, and a couple of things I wanted to say about the city of San Pablo, just to kind of orient you to some of the things you might not already know. They became a member of ICLEI, the International Council for Local Environmental Initiatives, in 2009. Many of our cities and towns in our existing jurisdiction became ICLEI members around that time, or some before, some after. And they also enacted a climate action plan, which is typically what you do after you join ICLEI. Their climate action plan was approved in 2012. Their goal, the greenhouse gas reduction goal, is an 18% reduction below 2005 levels of GHG emissions by the year 2020. And to achieve this goal, they have a couple of initiatives in place. They would like to increase renewable energy use by 15% and energy use reduction objectives, that's energy efficiency, by 20% in existing buildings. And as of 2005, energy consumption represented about 30% of their total community emissions. So there's a lot of opportunity for them to be able to make progress towards their goal by having a choice for a cleaner, renewable product for their customers. They also received 2 federal grants in 2010 that allowed them to implement energy efficiency programs, including the Energy Efficiency and Conservation Block Grant and the Climate Showcase Communities Grant. So those are just some of the some background information about San Pablo, their interests, the interest that they've expressed to us through their membership letter that's also attached here to the board item. Really reflects kind of a shared desire to increase renewable choices and do more around energy efficiency. So that's kind of an overview of San Pablo. Before opening it up for questions, though, I wanted to say a little bit about the process that we are undertaking here with considering expansion. If you look through the kind of the step-by-step process that we follow, you'll see that in step 1 is an interested community goes to their governing body and gets a membership request in place that they submit to us if they're interested in joining. Step 2 is really the internal evaluative process that we go through at the staff level to look at whether the timing is right, whether internal resources are available to consider the request, and really to ensure that there wouldn't be any impact to core agency functions as far as day-to-day operations. This staff decision-making process, a lot goes into it, and I'm happy to answer more questions about it. I'll just say a little bit now to keep it brief, but can go into more detail if possible. Part of the goal with this step 2 decision-making process is to look at kind of lumping small communities together. If we're, for example, when we went through the enrollment process with Richmond, we had a chunk of about 40,000 customers that needed to be served, and we went through a procurement effort that was reasonable to go through. It takes some resources to go through a separate procurement. If we went through a separate procurement for a group of 5,000 customers, and then another group of 6,000 customers, and then another group of 3,000 customers, it wouldn't be very efficient. And so what we've determined makes the most sense at the staff level is to look at more of a bundled approach to adding small communities in a more bundled way. So the East Bay request that we have received, along with the Napa request that we received, still come in with a customer base substantially below the customer base at Richmond. We actually, just to give you kind of a feel for the numbers, and this is combined, we are anticipating somewhere around 13,000 customers in Napa, that's post opt-out. And in San Pablo, San Pablo and Albany together is also about 13,000 post opt-out. So we're looking at a total number of customers from those three communities of about 23,500 customers, which is about 12,000 less than Richmond. So that's just to sort of give you a handle on the scale that we're looking at. Again, this evening we're really just talking about San Pablo, but I thought it would be helpful to just pause and kind of give folks a lay of the land of where we are with some of the other requests that are coming our way. Should also point out that there is an item on the agenda in the city of El Cerrito later this month to request membership. And this is another small community that's in the East Bay, so they would kind of fit into that East Bay bundle that we're looking at, and also wouldn't push us beyond the number of enrollments that we saw in Richmond. It would still keep us below that by about 8,000 or so. I think in light of that, I think it would also be worth just articulating that I think that if we received additional requests beyond El Cerrito, I don't expect that staff would come to you with a request to consider additional communities at that time. I think that that would be a good chunk to consider doing in a group procurement and a bundle procurement effort. And if additional requests came in, we'd probably need to delay them and kind of put them on hold for a year or so and kind of go through the full process that we need to go through with the enrollment of a new community base, and then kind of revisit where we are and see where we want to go from there. So it's kind of an overview. Also, I want to point out that as we go through the process of doing a membership study, there's a lot of continual monitoring that happens throughout the process so that we can ensure stability, make adjustments as needed, and really keep the process going at a reasonable rate or pace so that we're not rushed and we're not taking away from staff resources that are needed for other things. And the last thing I'd like to note, just kind of from a big picture perspective, is that we've seen from Sonoma Clean Power's recent launch that they've really been able to take advantage of some lower market rates that are available right now. And it's likely that if we were to add some additional loads, some additional customers, we would likely be able to take advantage of the same market costs that they have benefited from in their launch. And I won't give it away, but we have seen some promising results with the study in Napa. So, with that, I'd like to answer any questions that you all have, or I'm happy to also go into more detail on any of these areas.
Questions? So Don, going to your overall point, at some point we're going to start really, deciding, hey, does it make sense to continue looking at additional communities? Your analysis, though, is that the current batch does make sense for us, including the most recent example, San Pablo. Could you elaborate a little bit more, like why haven't we already hit the line versus putting it out a little bit further?
Yeah, good. I'm glad that you asked, because I think what would be helpful to walk through in a little bit more detail is the membership criteria. So in your packet, one of the items attached to this item is the affiliate membership process, and down at the bottom of that, there's a list of membership criteria, A through G. And the first couple of items here, the first three items, in fact, are part of the quantitative analysis that we do when we conduct the membership study. And the results of that quantitative analysis will be presented to you in technical committee this month for Napa. But we'll be doing the same quantitative analysis for any city that gets approval by your board to go through the membership process. And then items D through G are a little bit more qualitative. There's kind of a qualitative and quantitative element to each of these, but it's really looking at kind of making sure that there are new opportunities to install solar, new opportunities to conduct energy efficiency programs, greater demand for jobs and economic activity, and then the ability to create a stronger voice for MCE at the state and regulatory level. So at this point in time, it's hard to imagine a community that wouldn't fit in, that wouldn't have benefits in all of those areas, but things could change in the future. And so that's why we felt like it was important to have this membership criteria kind of laid out so that we spend some time to look in an objective way before going forward. The analysis that we do internally, though, is before we even get into these membership criteria, we really look at staff resources and time and what is the right approach to doing procurement in a way that's logical and doesn't get us spread too thin in a lot of different directions. So what we're recommending to you is going forward with the City of San Pablo because of its location, its proximity to our existing customer base, and because it would be a relatively low lift staff-wise to add the procurement to our existing efforts with Albany and Napa, and to do the enrollment in a community that's very close to actually within our existing jurisdiction.
Okay. Tom, do you have any thoughts on it?
No, I just, the little bit of trivia that Dawn brought up is that San Pablo is completely surrounded by Richmond. Unique circumstance, but, you know.
How did they get away?
Kind of like Crimea. Yeah, exactly. Any further questions or comments at this point?
I've got a comment. I really appreciated your big picture explanation, Don. But yeah, honestly, and getting back to this point, the map kind of says it all to me, really, and supports the various arguments that you've made. Geographically, it just seems to make a tremendous amount of sense to have one consistent area there for messaging and communications, and also adding on more of a bundled group in terms of energy procurement. So it seems to me there's very good reasons to take the next step and take a closer look.
Yep.
Yeah. So I'd move this item.
Great.
I'm on a roll.
You are. Bob.
Quick question. Yeah, you mentioned that the staff is about ready to take the information to the technical committee for Napa. What do you see as just an estimate of the time frame for Albany, San Pablo, and El Cerrito?
Yeah, that's a great question. We've not yet completed the data request process with PG&E. That's really the first step in that membership analysis. We haven't yet done that for any of the 3 East Bay communities, 2 in the hopper, and assuming we may have El Cerrito in the boat soon. So we expect it'll be at least a month before we have data to work with on the East Bay communities. So it's likely that we would be coming to you in the probably in the June or July timeframe, sometime in the summer, with information on the East Bay communities.
And the intent is to study all 3 of them jointly?
Well, yes. I think that when we do the quantitative analysis, we look at each community individually, because each community will need to make a final determination regarding joining the agency by passing an ordinance. That's required by law. So we will need to have information on each one separately so that we can determine individually if each one will work. But I do anticipate that when we present the information to you on the East Bay communities, we will provide you with kind of overarching information for the 3 communities, and then we can also get into subsets of information if folks want to know about individual communities broken down. The analysis will be done independently, but we'll have some kind of bundled results that we can present to you at the end.
Okay. So we have a motion from Director Sears.
Second.
Director Bailey, second. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? That matter carries. Okay, item 9, greenhouse gas emissions analysis. a very important item in our efforts, ongoing efforts to be transparent and document our greenhouse gas savings.
All right, good introduction there. You may have covered my first slide.
I have my moments.
That's good. The job gets easier as we go along. So, as you pointed out, an emission factor is really, it's an important metric in the sense that it really measures the rate at which a particular activity produces greenhouse gas emissions. And really, in particular, carbon dioxide, that's really the key greenhouse gas that we're looking at here. And in the electric power sector, which of course is applicable for MCE and its business, emission factors are really expressed in terms of the metered units of power that are produced and the emission intensity associated with those metered units of power. So for example, the way that greenhouse gas emissions are expressed are pounds of carbon dioxide per megawatt hour or metric tons of carbon dioxide per megawatt hour. So those are typical metrics that are used. And then some organizations like the California Air Resources Board or CARB also have created similar metrics that are pretty common, which measure the incremental impacts of other greenhouse gas emissions in terms of a metric called carbon dioxide equivalent. And so things like methane and sulfur dioxide and other greenhouse gas emissions, the effects of those emissions are captured in this CO2 equivalent metric. And we'll talk more about that in a little bit. So other background here regarding greenhouse gas emissions. Very common with electric utilities like MCE and PG&E and their peers. They use this metric to express the relative cleanliness of their power supplies. And with MCE in mind, we track both emission factors for our light green program separately, our deep green program separately, and then for our total portfolio generally. And now we'll be tracking them for a solar program as well. And I think you'll find that those will be low like the rest of our emissions factors. In any case, there are third-party organizations like the Climate Registry, of which MCE is a member, PG&E is a member. They've come up with their own kind of standards for verification, reporting, and compilation of various statistics that contribute to the development of emission factors. And with PG&E and MCE being members, it kind of creates this relatively standardized process for tracking these metrics and comparing them over periods of time. Interestingly enough, we're kind of in the process right now of developing a new kind of formal comparison that's presented to our customers. This was something that SB 790 required this joint comparison. It includes rates and costs and emission factors and general power sources, and it's pretty comprehensive. It's actually a really great piece of information. But this is a necessary exercise, not just because it's interesting information, because it's an important metric, generally speaking, in the electric utility industry, but because we have to present it on this bill comparison. And really against the incumbent utility here. There is kind of a quirky timeline associated with reporting greenhouse gas emissions and emission factors because of the settlement cycle in the electric utility industry and delays in getting final data, both in terms of retail sales to customers and then also in terms of power production, final statistics in that regard, as well as various review and audit processes that go on thereafter. There can be delays of up to 12 to 24 months kind of following the operational period when we're actually able to get these statistics out. And so recently, PG&E just released, actually in February of 2014, PG&E released its final emission factor for 2012. So that's kind of the delay that we're talking about, pretty extensive. There are some key data components that are necessary in order to calculate an emission factor. One is the total retail sales that you made as a service provider to your customers. The other piece Second piece are the specific generating sources that were used to supply those needs for your customers. And those are typically broken out into these broad-based categories. And you're all pretty familiar with them now, I'm guessing, but things like natural gas and nuclear and hydroelectric, solar, wind, and various other renewable technologies. There is also a catch-all, and you'll see this on the power content label that PG&E includes in its mailer bill inserts, and we include and post on our website as well. And this is this catch-all unspecified or system power. And the way that the electric power market works in the state of California is that when many transactions go on, the buyer doesn't designate a specific generator with which it's contracting. It's really more of a portfolio approach. And so it becomes very difficult to call out whether or not you buy power from generator X or whether or not you buy power from a pool of resources that include generator X among many others. And so this catch-all was created by the regulators to express that market reality that exists. And you can see here kind of in one of the sub-bullets that MCE, just like PG&E, provides really a considerable portion of its power supply from these unspecified sources, which in the state of California are primarily, if not significantly, skewed towards natural gas generation. So there are other pieces of the puzzle that fall into that unspecified categories. Some of them are kind of residual renewable resources, some of them are hydroelectric, then there are other various sources, but the primary and prevailing source that makes up that unspecified category is natural gas. And then the last piece of information that's necessary to calculate an emission factor are the source-specific emission rates for each one of those generators or generator types that you buy power from. So if you're going to perform this calculation, this is kind of what it looks like. And if you're into math, you can kind of follow this along. It's not a particularly complicated formula, but what you would do in order to calculate your emission factor is you would take all of the power that you buy for each one of the generators, multiply it by the emission rate for that specific generator, add those up, divide it by your retail sales, and there's your emission factor for your portfolio. So I don't want to spend a whole lot of time on this. But I just thought I'd throw that up there, I guess, as much fun as anything else. So, in terms of MCE's supply portfolio for the 2012 calendar year, which is really, that's the calendar year that we're comparing statistics with PG&E for right now. And you can see here on the leftmost column, these are the broadly defined fuel sources or categories that relate to our different purchases that we've made. So you'll see renewable broken out by both California RPS eligible and then non-RPS eligible. So these are still renewable fuel sources like wind, like biogas and biomass that may not qualify for California's RPS, if for no other reason because they haven't pursued the certification process, which isn't particularly rigorous. There just may not be a need for it for this particular generator, but they're still very much renewable. And in fact, many of those resources are green energy eligible, so they are kind of subject to a set of criteria that related to the age of the facility and whatnot. So again, don't want to understate the importance of those non-RPS eligible renewable resources. Again, very, very much renewable and also have zero emission rates. Then of course we have our zero carbon category, which is all large hydroelectric. And then we have our system power, which I just talked about. And as we kind of follow the columns over, you'll see the portion of our total retail sales volume that was supplied from each one of those resource categories, as well as the percentage that relates to each category, and then the applicable emission rate for each one of those fuel sources. And you'll see that, as you would reasonably expect, for renewable resources and hydroelectric resources, those have been ascribed an emission rate of 0. And then for our system power purchases, those actually, the California Air Resources Board has designated its own emission factor for unspecified sources. This was recently published actually February of this year, in their guidelines for reporting on emission factors. So this is a publicly available number. It's something that they suggested to us that we use for this very purpose. And the website's included in case you're interested in taking a look at it. You can see the applicable section of the document in case you're interested in sourcing it. But the bottom line is, and this is the second column from the right, that our total portfolio emission factor for the 2012 calendar year was 373 pounds of CO2 equivalent per megawatt hour. So that number in and of itself isn't particularly interesting. But when you look at that relative to the alternative service provider within MCE service territory, I think you'll find that this is really where the interest comes into play. And in 2012, PG&E reported an emission factor of 445 pounds of CO2 per megawatt hour, making MCE by comparison quite a lot cleaner, over 19% cleaner in fact, on an aggregate portfolio basis, over 17% cleaner. For our light green customers, infinitely cleaner. For our deep green customers, as evidenced by the meniscate here, which it's a great new word that I learned. But in any case, I think we fared very well. That's the moral of the story. And again, I tried, just in the interest of transparency, Director Connolly pointed this out. I think that with this exercise in particular, it's critically important that we are very clear about where these numbers are coming from, that our customers can go and look them up if they so choose. And so you'll find here that there are a couple of links to data sources so that our customers, if they are in some fund, can go out and look these numbers up, see them for themselves, and see some of the discussion that surrounds these numbers as well, whether it's in the California Air Resources document or with PG&E's kind of posting of its 2012 emission factor. So in your packet, there are also a couple of other items related to this particular discussion. One of them is really kind of a broader-based discussion focused on understanding our greenhouse gas emission factor. Gets into kind of some of the methodology involved at a more detailed level with calculating our emission factor, not just for our aggregate portfolio, but also for light green and deep green. Also talks about the comparison to PG&E in that document, as well as kind of the process going forward for dealing with this as well. And then there's also a certification template in there. A little less than a year ago, we got a call from one of our customers that happens to be a member of the climate registry. And as part of their requisite reporting obligation, they needed a certification from their service provider regarding the emission factor that applied to their electric service, and asked that we prepare this document using a template that's made available by the climate registry. And we filled that out and sent it to the climate registry, and we asked, what do you think? Are there any issues with our methodology and the numbers that we would be presenting to our customers? And we found no issues with that. And so we've updated that template for the 2012 calendar year, and we'll make that available to any MCE customers that also happen to be members of the climate registry, so that they can submit this document with their other reported information. And part of that template includes some placeholders where they insert their name and kind of identify the service option that they selected, so they can attribute the appropriate emission factor to that service option. But those are two other items that are in there for you to take a look at, but I think the presentation, generally speaking, captures the gist of those items. And as far as how things look going forward, well, we've already performed some preliminary calculations related to our 2013 portfolio, and it turns out that there was kind of a minor reduction year over year in our emission factor, which is great because it was already low in 2012. It's even lower still, or will be lower still in 2013. And we've compared that to PG&E's projected emission factor, which of course won't be final for another year, but their preliminary estimates indicate a slight reduction as well year over year, but the way that we compare is still very favorable, 16.2% lower. projected anyway for 2013. And so I hope you all are as pleased with those numbers as I am, and I hope our customers are as well. So I think the recommendation tonight is kind of approve the use and release of these numbers, and so we'll post them on our website and make the template available to our customers that need that to complete the reporting efforts. That's it. Okay. Any questions?
Questions? Okay, good work. Members of the public? All right. So we have a request for a motion to accept the report and methodology. All right. Director Line, do I have a second?
Second.
Ray. All in favor? Aye. Opposed? That matter carries. Item 10, energy efficiency.
That's all right. Let me call this.
Hello again. So we have a few fun things to talk about this evening. Pretty short presentation, pretty short update. We're sort of in the midst of playing out some of the changes that we introduced to our program that we talked about last month, and we'll have a little bit more information about how they're impacting uptake, hopefully in the next couple of months. So we're in a wait and see pattern at the moment. One of the, just real quickly, well, this doesn't seem to be working, but yeah. Real short update, one slide. All right. So just a quick overview, a pipeline report on our multifamily and small commercial program, just so that you have an idea of how many projects we have and some of the impacts we're seeing. I wanted to talk a bit about the home utility report program, which is under our single family program, and then also give you an update courtesy of Dana Armanino, Marin County, from the activities of BayREG, which stands for the Bay Area Regional Energy Network, which I'll touch on when we get to that slide. And then finally, give an update on our post-2014 funding request, which, as you may recall from our last meeting, has been in process. So for the small commercial program, just a real quick verbal update. We've had saturation campaigns running in both Richmond and in Mill Valley over the course of the last month. These saturation campaigns look slightly different in these areas. In Richmond, we're working with the East Bay Energy Watch Partnership, including the City of Richmond has been very engaged. Adam has been very helpful. And over there, we instituted an approach where we actually called property owners in advance of going out to do the sort of door-to-door canvassing to try and increase the acceptance of the teams when they're in the streets. And that actually had pretty good success in Richmond. It saved the teams as much as 3 days in the field, which helps really overall with administrative costs. And so we were very successful with that. We tried the same approach in Marin in the Mill Valley campaign and found that it wasn't working. Folks were spending a lot of time on the phone and were getting a lot of unanswered calls. People weren't returning calls, and they basically weren't able to actually get a hold of people. So for whatever reason, that same approach didn't have traction in Mill Valley. But what we have found in Mill Valley going door to door is that they've been able to get as many as 7 to 10 audits a day, which is very high for the saturation campaign. So different neighborhoods call for slightly different approaches, and we're just kind of learning as we go. But by and large, I'd say that there are successful stories from both of those campaigns. So far, what we've completed is 71 projects, which is equivalent to about 169,000 kilowatt hours, kind of an abstract number, so I use the EPA equivalencies calculator, which is really fun, by the way, if you ever want to figure out how many trees you're saving or how many barrels of oil you're equivalent to. And the one I liked was the equivalencies in terms of cars off the road. So we have successfully taken about 24 cars off the road through our small commercial program. Moving on to multifamily. So far we have in the pipeline 12 projects, or about 2,578 units. Of that, about 678 of those are completed, and the rest of those are currently moving through our pipeline slowly but surely. One of the things we're finding in multifamily is that there are long lead times for these projects. It takes a lot of effort working with property owners and managers One of the things we've really discovered as well is that there's significant turnover a lot of times with property owners and managers. So we'll be working really closely with one person, and then they'll leave to go to a new opportunity, and then we have to work to catch somebody new up to speed, and they have to position themselves in the organization to be the champion. So that's proving to be a challenge. We haven't yet figured out a silver bullet for addressing that, so something we continue to grapple with. In spite of that, we still have to date installed about 44,900 kilowatt hours and 3,400 therms. Collectively, both of those result in about 10 cars off the road. Quick single-family update, again focusing on the home utility report. We moved to expand the program from the home utility report, as you may recall from both February and March discussions. We had started a pilot where we were mailing mailers to customers in our service territory to let them know how much energy they were using, how much more energy they were using than their neighbor, and kind of shaming them into wanting to use less energy. From our 4,500 person pilot initially, we did see some positive results. I'll talk about the metrics in a second. And as a result of that, we expanded the program to more than 18,000 customers in our service territory. In addition, at the same time, there was a marketing campaign that actually Planet Ecosystems paid for out of pocket to try and drive traffic to their web portal. They wanted to see higher results in terms of community members and people actually going to the portal. So that was something that they invested in. We have seen significantly more traffic, 25% more traffic to this site, and that number is increasing every week. However, along with that higher traffic, we're also seeing something called a higher bounce rate, meaning people who leave the site after visiting just one page. So it's not clear that that increased traffic is resulting in increased engagement. So that's something that we're working with them to troubleshoot to see if there are ways that we can actually retain interest as people are visiting the site. You may remember from last month we talked about how the website is undergoing a series of changes. Planet Ecosystems is investing overall in their user interface. They actually brought on a contractor who met with some MCE staff to talk with us about our feedback from the site and our experiences from the site, and they're doing this with a handful of focus groups. So there are some fairly significant changes that they're envisioning for the process that they're working with us on. And our recommendation at this point is that hold off on marketing until those take place. Hopefully that can result in more cost-effective marketing. So that is the main update there. But we do have good news to report out from both the home utility report and the marketing campaign. So far we have 818 individuals who have actually created action plans through our web portal, which we think is a pretty exciting number. In addition to that, of the home utility report mailers that we've sent out, 309 people have actually taken the effort to go back onto the website and claim their account and really start that relationship with their energy usage, which is really above and beyond what that mailer is even contemplated to do. From the mailers themselves going out, thus far we've been able to see about 78,000 kilowatt hours that we've been able to claim, equivalent to about 11 cars off the road. The way that we can estimate those savings is something called a normative comparative approach, where you basically take a population of people that you're treating by sending these mailers to, and then you compare them to a comparable population of a control group who you're not sending mailers to. And from the folks who are in our treatment group, we've seen a 1.2% reduction in energy use since they started receiving the mailers. And that's at a 90% confidence interval. So pretty solid number so far. Also, that number is anticipated to grow over time. So, so far we're pretty happy with the results that we're seeing in that program. So I got this information courtesy of Dana, the Bay Area Regional Energy Network. A little background for those of you who haven't been steeped in the energy efficiency regulatory world. The regional energy networks are something that is a new sort of innovative concept that just occurred in the 2013-2014 program. Basically, historically, the utilities have worked with governments in something called the local government partnership model, where there's a very structured contract. They have very specific programs that they allow the governments to work with them to implement, and they focus a lot on achieving savings in municipal buildings, things like wastewater, upgrading City Hall. And a lot of local governments were frustrated with this model and felt that they had a lot more capacity to administer more creative programs, that they were more responsive to their local regions and wanted to implement something that was a little more specific to the local conditions, especially after the stimulus funding came through and a lot of local governments received funding to do programs. So as a result of sort of all of this built up momentum, a lot of local governments worked with Energy Division to envision something called the Regional Energy Network. And in 2013-2014, the Commission actually invited applications from local governments who wanted to form something like this. So the Bay Area Regional Energy Network is a result of that. 9 local counties in the Bay Area applied to the California Public Utilities Commission. Marin County is one of those. In Marin County, the County of Marin is the local implementer, and we work very, very closely with them on a regular basis. So a lot of this has been happening in the background. A really good example of that, which Jamie will talk about later, is that we have a financing program. The financing program is supposed to supplement the home upgrade rebate program. But we're not administering the home upgrade rebate program. We're only administering the financing program. So we work super closely with the Bay Area Regional Energy Network, who is locally implementing that program, so that they are making their customers aware of our financing program. We share marketing materials, sometimes put stuff on their materials. We let them see our materials before they go out as well. Just an example of how we kind of work really side by side. An update from that program that Dana wanted me to share. They have, at this point, 34 homeowners who have undergone the home upgrade program in the County of Marin. They've dispersed about $15,000 worth of rebates. A PACE update, which I'm really excited to mention as well. One thing worth noting is that we worked with the County of Marin to get the California First program enabled locally. It's been undergoing legal validation actions for almost a year at this point. They're sort of at the mercy of court scheduling for that. And that's the final necessary hurdle before that program can officially be made available locally. But they anticipate that's coming very soon. At the same time, there's a program that operates, it initially started operating out of Western Riverside Coalition of Governments called the HERO program. I believe it's the Home Energy Retrofit, I forget what the O stands for, organization. And that's actually a residential PACE program that's been operating sort of in defiance of the FHFA in Western Riverside. But they have accomplished over 1,200 home retrofits in the LA, or in the Western Riverside area in a very short amount of time, in about a year and a half. So it's been making a lot of waves, and they have started to expand and start to come talk to the county and others locally to see if there's any interest in doing the program locally. So the county is doing a lot of work sort of examining the options and thinking about who they can enable locally. Along with those activities that are happening, some of you may have heard that Governor Brown actually worked directly with the FHFA to set aside funding to serve as insurance, so that if the FHFA suffers any losses as a result of PACE liens being put on Freddie and Fannie mortgages, actually the government of California will front the funds to the FHFA to cover those losses. And as a result of those actions on behalf of Governor Brown, there's now openness and consideration of residential PACE occurring again in California. So it's super exciting that that's happening. There's a lot of activity of folks just gearing up to take advantage of that. It's because of that that HERO is sort of courting Marin, and actually California First is also considering launching their residential side as well. They had always set up their program to accommodate residential if and when that became available. So exciting news on the PACE front. A couple more things. Proposition 39, some of you may remember Prop 39 passed and set aside a significant amount of funding for school and workforce development related activities. The county has been taking the lead on implementing that program locally. So far they've accomplished 60 energy audits in the county of Marin, which is significant with schools. They're working with 15 out of the 19 school districts on next steps. So they've been very active in reaching out with those schools, helping them to actually take those energy audits and convert it into action. So they're hard at work. A lot of good work there. And then finally, they are also the implementers of the Codes and Standards program. So they have been doing a lot of work educating contractors and building officials on the upcoming changes to code. You may recall that the 2014 codes were supposed to be implemented in January, but there was a vote at the Energy Commission in December to postpone that until July. So now we're anticipating right in the month of June a huge rush of projects coming in before code kicks in, and then after that, really a need to help educate contractors and the community about the impacts. So that's really what the county is doing. One more thing that they gave me that I didn't put on the slide but I wanted to mention is that the county continues to be sort of a sustainability center for the county more largely, and they're actually working with Sausalito right now to finalize the Sausalito Climate Action Plan, which is the second to last jurisdiction in Marin to do that. So that's awesome that they're getting everybody on board and helping to get cities over that hurdle and actually implement climate action plans. So props to Sausalito.
Is that what's the last one?
Corte Madera. I didn't want to call anybody out, but Corte Madera is the last one. Who has not yet
We got work to do, Sloan.
I'm sure we would be happy. I didn't plant her in the audience to ask that. So our 2015 funding request, here is the exciting stuff. As you may recall, again, from our conversations over the last several months, the California Public Utilities Commission has requested that as they move to a 10-year rolling portfolio cycle, that 2015 be treated as sort of a bridge or a transitional year. And as a result, they requested from program administrators to submit a funding request that was more or less the 50% extension of 2013-2014, and they didn't want to see significant changes to programs. They were willing to consider changes for code compliance, for Proposition 39, limited changes to the home upgrade program, and anything that was required to respond to goals and savings changes. So none of those really affected us significantly. So what we put forward was more or less just an extension request for our existing programs. There are a few changes which I'll call out specifically here. Our multifamily program, I'm requesting slightly more funding than a 50% extension because that program has good traction. It's been a good solid program for us. The small commercial program, I'm requesting slightly less funding because it actually has been having kind of a hard time getting folks to get up and take action. So reallocating resources in those portfolios based on where we've seen the most traction. The single family program, I'm also requesting a very slight increase. The financing program is really the big one where things are different. When we requested funding for the financing program, the vast majority, I would say probably 90% of those program funds were for credit enhancement. That's in the form of a loan loss reserve. So that funding is actually sitting in a bank and it's attached to specific loans that are originated. And it doesn't get spent until those loans, if and when those loans default. So that money actually, the bulk of it is still unspent. It hopefully will remain unspent for the lifetime of those loans, although I'm sure we'll experience some losses in the program. So it doesn't make sense to ask for more funding in terms of credit enhancement since we already have a significant portion there. So instead what I ask for is funding for marketing and outreach so that we can actually make people aware of the program offering. And you'll see some of the exciting marketing that we're rolling out initially. We're already feeling budget constrained and would love to do more, so I thought it made sense to try and ask more there. Overall, what this means for our portfolio is that we're asking for slightly less than a 50% extension because of that credit enhancement dollar that we're not asking for. So it's a little lower than a 50%, but I think overall it will reflect as well. In terms of next steps, we submitted our funding request officially on the 26th. Comments for parties are due tomorrow, so we'll get to see what everybody has to say about everybody else's funding request. It's always fun. And then we get a chance to do reply comments on the 17th of April. So far, the Commission has stuck to a timeline, a very aggressive timeline, and they're anticipating a decision on June 12th on funding for 2015. So we'll probably by next board meeting get to have a good update on some of the activity in this. Worth noting also, I did not include on here, but as soon as this proceeding is, as soon as they approve 2015 funding, they're immediately launching into the second phase of this proceeding, which is dealing with the longer term issues associated with shifting to a 10-year portfolio. And that's really where a lot of rubber is going to meet the road, where there's going to be a lot of creativity required from all kinds of energy efficiency administrators. So it should be an exciting time if you're along playing me. With that, are there any questions?
Questions? Okay, well, great report, Becky. Let's move to item 11, communications update.
Thank you. Good evening. All right, so I have exciting news to tell you, which is that we have finished the production of 4 of the videos that we created with micro documentaries. So the videos have 4 different topics, and they're short documentary style films that are meant to engage our audience. So the first film is a general about MCE overview. We have another film that's an expert testimonial, and it's about the San Rafael Airport Solar Project. We have a film that's more educational, and it's about our energy efficiency program and our partnership with the Marin City Community Development Corporation. And we also have a film that's a customer testimonial, and it features our deep green commercial businesses. So I wanted to give you guys a little sneak preview of one of these videos right now, and it's the general About Us video. So I'm gonna hit the lights.
I was born in Nairobi, Kenya, where my parents were serving in the Peace Corps. And when I traveled back to Kenya, I was really struck by the amount of resources that they have there and how very wasteful we are in the way that we use our energy and our other resources. A lot of folks don't realize that one of the biggest contributors to greenhouse gas emissions is the energy that we use in our homes. And right now, in most places in California, there's only one choice for power supply. MCE is a local not-for-profit government agency whose mission is to get more renewable energy onto the grid for customers and reduce greenhouse gas emissions. We select and purchase greener power supply. That energy is delivered through the existing wires to customers' homes and businesses. We offer 2 energy products to customers, light green, which is 50% renewable, and then our other choice is deep green, and that's 100% renewable. So far, MCE has more than doubled the amount of renewable energy flowing into our customers' homes and businesses. Another way we've been able to help the community is through job creation. We've also impacted the environment by reducing the amount of greenhouse gas emissions coming from our communities. Collectively, so far, we've reduced 139 million pounds of carbon emissions. We've been able to create a program that empowers communities to make a choice. If there were more programs like MCE, we could cut in half the amount of fossil fuel. We'd be able to take dollars that now are going to private corporations and shareholder profits and redirect them into our own communities. We would have a more healthy planet for our future generations.
I hope you guys all enjoyed that. It's been a really fun process to produce all of these films, and that was a two-minute video. So the videos are all going to be 2 minutes long, but we have the option of shortening them to be 30 seconds. So the impact of these films is really going to depend on our distribution of these films. So we will be sending out email links, and I do hope that you guys will distribute them to your own social networks. But when we have the option of shortening them to 30 seconds, we can broadcast them on local cable television in our service area and target Marin and Richmond specific households. We can show them at conferences and events. We can post them on our website, and they will be on our website, all over our social media, so Facebook, Twitter, our YouTube channel, LinkedIn, our email blasts. We can also distribute them to other communities who are interested in the program and learning about MCE and at events and conferences that we do. So I'm really excited about that first video and hope you guys all enjoyed it. But I'm going to get back to business for a minute with the PowerPoint. So the first thing I wanted to update you guys about is a new on-bill message. So you probably remember that we recently had a message on all of our customer bills about our rate increase, and that has switched to be about our customer privacy policy. So the California Public Utilities Commission requires that each year we send a direct notice to our customers, which can be an on-bill notice, reminding them that customer privacy is very important to us and directing them to a link where they can see that policy. Last year was the first year that we distributed this to our customers on a bill, and we'll be doing it every year going forward. So this is the second time we've done that. Becky mentioned our Green Home Loan Program, our financing program, which we are calling Green Home Loans for the residential aspect. And we are just embarking on an advertising campaign for that. So we're really excited about it. It's a complex program that we have simplified through our messaging to get across the practical and financial value of participating in energy efficiency programs and utilizing the green home loans for that. So you can see the publications that we will be advertising in. It's the Marin Home Magazine, the Marin Independent Journal, the Richmond Post, the Richmond Pulse, and Ad Taxi. You may remember me talking about Ad Taxi in the past. It's a web-based advertising portal. It has a very broad range. It targets people in our geographic region. And we will begin that advertising campaign actually this Sunday. It should be the first ad that lands, and that will be in the Marin IJ. So these are some samples of what the ad looks like. We are going to be using a series of ads with 4 different messages, with 4 different headlines. So there's different photos for all of the distributions, which I'll get to because of the different audiences that read those different newspapers. This first one is for the Marin Home Magazine. It's a full-page ad, and it's going to be accompanied by an advertorial that was put at your seats today. It's called Take Your Home from Yesterday to Tomorrow. So you can read a little bit about the energy efficiency programs that are available for residents and our green home loans. So this is the first ad. The quote is energy rebates and a low interest loan. I even got new counters. Wish your home was more affordable, more comfortable, valuable, affordable, and efficient? It can be with our Easy Green Home Loan and California Energy Rebates. For loans up to $30,000 and rebates up to $4,500, simply get an in-home assessment from an energy expert. Pick your favorite projects, qualify for your loan with a 640 credit score, then repay on your PG&E bill. Use up to 30% of your loan for other home projects of your choice. Homeowners get started today by calling your home upgrade advisor. So Becky was talking earlier about our partnership with Bayren, and the phone number that we have listed here is for the home upgrade advisor that's offered through Bayren. And so we have provided them lots of information about our green home loan program and have worked with them to develop a script. And they are going to be answering phone calls about this program, which is really great because they have so much expertise in the energy efficiency programs that are available to our customers. We did some trial calls in the last week or so, and I was really impressed with the customer service that I got. They're super smart, they knew all about our program, walked us through the website in detail, and it was an excellent experience. So I was really happy about that. I think one thing that's really interesting about the loan is the fact that 30% of the loan can be used for projects that aren't related to energy efficiency, and that's what this particular quote is targeting, which is the new counters, so that part isn't related to energy efficiency. So each of our ads will have a different quote or a main headline, but the body of the ads will remain the same. So I'm going to go through and show you some of the ads from our other periodicals. This is the first ad that'll be running in the Marin IJ. It'll be a half-page ad on Wednesdays and Sundays, and also a half-page ad in the Pacific Sun, which is obviously a weekly periodical. This ad will be running in the Richmond Post, and this is a half-page ad. Again, it's a weekly periodical. This ad will be running in the Richmond Pulse, and the Richmond Pulse is bilingual. It's also a weekly periodical, and so this is the English version, and this is the Spanish version, which will be running in the same edition of the print. So one thing I just wanted to mention about these ads, again, to reiterate, is that these ads will be changing out. So there's a whole bunch of different ads right here, and it's really to grab the attention of the different readership for each of the periodicals. So there will be a series of 3 other ad combinations as far as the quotes. We are, actually one more thing, going back to the green home loans that I wanted to mention is that our partnership with First Community Bank has been going really well. They are providing the funding for these loans, and they are also contributing for half of the cost of this advertising campaign. In addition, just to the print ads, we'll also be doing a direct mail piece, and we're going to be doing events to try and get some participation from residents and energy efficiency upgrades, and hopefully having them utilize the green home loans as well. We'll be talking more about those events at our upcoming meetings. Okay, now the My Energy Tool advertising. So Becky was talking already about the results from that advertising campaign. That's being funded completely by Planet Ecosystems, but they are doing an electronic ad campaign. It's all web-based, and their ad campaign is on Facebook, Google AdWords, which is for when you're searching something, an ad will come up in Google, and online display ads, and that's sort of like Ad Taxi, where the ads are going to be across a whole different variety of websites depending on your geographic location and the certain types of web content. So we're targeting people in a specific age, homeowners, people who have environmental interests, etc. Actually, so I'm going to go through the ads right now, and they're electronic, so hopefully they work on this PowerPoint just as they will on the website, and I'll go ahead and read them for you. Colder inside than out? Make your house snugly warm. We'll show you how. So that's the first step. Your neighbors use less electricity. Learn their secrets. Click for low-cost, easy energy-saving steps. How do light bulbs suck up water? Most power plants use water to make electricity. Save energy, save California's water. We'll show you how. What's even better than going green with us? Reducing your monthly bills. Click for low-cost, easy action steps. Okay, that was the last in our series of ads from Planet Ecosystems. And then I want to remind you all, I sent out an email this week to please tell your friends and family about our Deep Green campaign, where we have partnered with 7 local nonprofits. Anyone who signs up for Deep Green between today and Earth Day can vote for one of these local nonprofits. And on Earth Day, we'll tally up the votes. So the nonprofit with the most votes will receive $1,000 from us, and second and third runners up each will both receive $500. We're also going to be at the Marin Earth Day event this weekend, and we'll be promoting this campaign. And it'll be our first event where people can actually sign up for Deep Green on the spot. So we have a new system in place with our customer relationship management system. That's really cool, and we're excited to get some signups there. And one last surprise, keep in mind that half of the revenue for Deep Green goes to local renewable projects. So I want to show you one more video that's ready for you today about our San Rafael Solar Airport project. Yeah.
I grew up in northern Wisconsin with a very close relationship to the land. We pretty much grew and raised all of our own food between our gardens and our livestock and our pigs. When we talk about global warming, resources are limited. We've all got to do something to minimize our carbon footprint. To be a local renewable supplier, you need to either have rooftops or land. Here at the airport, we had rooftops that were essentially going unused. This is a family-owned property here in Marin County. As a real estate owner, you're always looking to maximize the opportunities of your buildings and your land. So it was natural to look at solar panels on these rooftops. Marin Clean Energy developed a feed-in tariff program where they say to a business person like me, Bob, if you build a solar power plant, we'll guarantee to buy the power from you at above market rates. So the benefit to us as investors is we're comfortable putting our equity into these panels on these rooftops, and then obviously MCE is committed to renewable energy. We have 4,600 solar panels on 48 of our aircraft hangars. On a summer day, that's enough electricity to power 1,200 local homes. The number one thing I love about this project is that it's really setting an example for others to follow. We're providing clean energy to keep our air and water clean. The project has employed local workers. If all communities can develop these types of projects, maybe we can supply 100% of the power locally.
those are fantastic, and you deserve huge credits for everything. I was just wondering, what are the chances of, you know, in theaters, you have the availability of having ads run.
Yep.
What would be better than show a movie in a theater?
Yes.
And the Century Theaters are owned by one family.
We did, yeah, that I think is something we're definitely going to look into. So although we never had videos like this, we had ads running at the movie theaters a few years ago. They were static ads though, and not videos like this. So that's something we're definitely going to look into. We're also going to be airing these ads on the public access channel, where these videos are shown of our own board meetings. So I mean, technically we have had videos, right, of our board meetings. It's a little different.
Music's not as
A lot longer. Yeah, I think looking into local theaters is a really good idea. I didn't say, and I should have, that at Earth Day Marin, they'll be showing the videos this weekend on their stage. And there's also a theater and a film screening at the Marin County Fair this year, and we're looking to try and get our videos displayed there as well.
Cool.
Yeah.
Tell about where this is.
Earth Day Marin is at Tamaulipas High School? Redwood High School.
11 to 5 this Sunday.
Thank you.
Show your t-shirt.
That's a great
t-shirt.
Absolutely.
And so much more.
Jamie, we'll have a booth at Earth Day?
Yes, we will.
Okay, all right. Well, great. Any questions for Jamie? Comments? Members of the public? Great report, exciting. Be interested to hear about the results of the contest as well. Be great.
Yeah, yep. You're
So, all right. Item 12, regulatory update.
Shalini, do you want to take her? For those of you who don't know me, I'm Shalini Swaroop. I'm the Regulatory Counsel at MCE, and tonight I'm standing in for our esteemed Legal Director, Beth Kelly. The first thing I want to do, again, is to introduce Martha, who's a new person on our regulatory team. She is a strong environmental advocate. She just spent over 2 years at Earth Justice, and she's previously worked with the California Wilderness Coalition. For all of you political types on our board, which is all of you, she has a lot of political experience. She's managed and organized dozens of political campaigns on different issues. I'll let you talk to her about her myriad topics she's covered. She's also an MBA candidate in sustainable enterprise at Dominican. So MCE is really lucky to have snagged her, and I'm personally thrilled to have another person on board right now.
And by the way, Martha, believe it or not, people watch these videos. So you're stop in the street now.
No pressure for me now, baby.
Yeah. It always amazes me.
So tonight I'm going to take you through 3 major topics. Our petition for modification of an energy efficiency decision on CCAs done by the California Public Utilities Commission. I'm going to call the California Public Utilities Commission the Commission. So I hope that's clear to everyone before we move forward. I will also do a legislative update, and then we will do an overview of the power charge indifference adjustment, which is the PCIA. And I know most of you are already extremely familiar with the PCIA, but I do know that we have some new folks on the board, so I thought we might just go back to basics for one night. In January, the Commission issued a decision on how CCAs apply for energy efficiency program funds. And this was a topic that we've covered in a number of board meetings. Director Bailey went to the CPUC with us, and he did some great advocacy as well on this issue. So the good part of the decision is that CCAs are confirmed to have the same rights and responsibilities as the utility administrators of the energy efficiency programs. The second good thing was that new CCAs like Sonoma Clean Power don't have to adhere to the normal 3-year application cycle set by the Commission. So when they're ready to apply for energy efficiency programs, they can just apply. So that's the good. We have the bad.
So first, statute indicates that CCAs should propose programs that don't overlap with existing statewide and regional programs. The decision had a really problematic definition of what statewide and regional means. They basically classified single utility programs as statewide and regional, which means we kind of have to do our energy efficiency programs around that existing definition. So that was a blow to us. The second thing that was bad for us is that the Commission required CCAs to adhere to all of the previous energy efficiency rules and decisions that they've put forward for the utilities. Now, we all know there's a number of differences between CCAs and utilities, not the least of which is motivation, right? Energy efficiency is in MCE's mission statement. Utilities actually receive a shareholder incentive for doing well in their energy efficiency programs. So obviously there's very different motivations, there's very different oversight. So we really argued that this shouldn't apply to us. All the decisions and rules shouldn't apply to CCAs because we're a totally different animal. The CPUC, the Commission didn't go for that. The Commission also did not acknowledge the need for an ombudsman, and we've found we've had a lot of implementation issues dealing with PG&E in our energy efficiency programs. The Commission did not really address this in the ultimate decision. So now we've covered the good and the bad, and fans of Clint Eastwood should know what's next. The ugly. So, the ugly part of the decision was that CCAs were given the same cost-effectiveness requirements as the utilities. Now, this is a problem because utilities have a much larger geographic footprint than a CCA. Obviously, PG&E takes up half the state. So they have a lot of different kinds of customers that they can do their energy efficiency programs for. So a large industrial customer will have a really great cost-effectiveness ratio. They base it on a ratio.
How do they measure it, like cost effectiveness?
So they measure cost effectiveness by taking the levelized cost of implementing a program. They take the benefits divided by the costs. And there's a ridiculous calculator that they've developed, an Excel spreadsheet-based calculator called the E3 calculator, which has hundreds of calculations that take every measure that you put into it, calculate the lifetime energy savings associated with that, the cost to the customer of doing it, the savings, the fiscal savings to the customer of doing it. There's adders for greenhouse gas benefits. It's crazy. And it's this huge clunky thing that just basically results in a ratio of the benefit to the cost. And if I can just like emphasize this point one more step, what makes it challenging for us is that an entity like PG&E that has half the geographical state can do something like an upstream CFL program, where they talk to Home Depot and they say, all right, we'll give you a little bit of money to make that bulb cheaper. Very cost effective to implement. They basically just hand a bunch of money over to Home Depot, who makes the point of sale transaction cheaper. And it makes their portfolio, it gives them the ability to balance programs like residential programs, like the home upgrade program, or other programs like the small commercial program we do, which require a lot of hand-holding, a lot of communication in these really hard to reach sectors. Because of that, there's just an inherent difference in the ability of one entity or the other to achieve that cost effectiveness on a portfolio basis. So.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah, by all means. So, as Becky was saying, because we have a much smaller territory, we don't really have the same abilities as a utility with the geographic footprint of half the state. And another reason is that 88% of MCE's customers are residential, and that's just not the kind of customer profile that these metrics have been based on. And when you really compare our residential programs to the utilities residential programs, we're pretty much neck and neck. So, the other thing that was ugly about this decision is that it limited CCA's ability to administer natural gas energy efficiency programs, and this is something we talked about a lot. So this decision is forward, it's moving, it's not retroactive, but so our current programs remain unaffected. But the decision was sort of schizophrenic on one hand, because every statewide policy objective from everywhere, from the California Energy Commission to the state of California, everything says when you do energy efficiency, you want those deep retrofits. You want to get into one building and do everything you can in that building. And this decision says, you know what, CCAs, why don't you just touch the electric stuff and leave the gas stuff? And, you know, there's all these policies about leaving stranded assets and not, you know, doing a single touch on one home. And the decision really goes contrary to all of that statewide policy. So that's why it's ugly. So what do we do when we're faced with an ugly CPUC decision? Well, we're MCE, so we're not just going to take that lying down, right? We filed a petition for modification. So our petition for modification only focuses on what was ugly. We kind of skipped over the bad because it was a surgical approach to what MCE believes are the most pressing issues to getting our energy efficiency programs running in a comparable way to the utility programs. So the first thing the petition asked was that we modify the cost effectiveness requirements for CCAs. And we hearkened back to a precedent the commission set when they approved our 2013 and 2014 programs, which was that they took a whole portfolio approach to cost effectiveness. And that really looked more at the types of programs we were offering, and it was up to the commission to make sure that the cost effectiveness was comparable to that of the utilities. The second thing we asked was to determine how CCAs can apply to administer natural gas energy efficiency programs for the next funding cycle. So, as I said before, our current programs remain unaffected by this decision because they were already approved previously. Now, to those of you who can't get enough regulatory, the petition is the very last document in your regulatory packet. And as an added bonus, the last page is a letter from Senator Mark Leno supporting CCA's ability to administer natural gas programs. So we really appreciate legislative support on this issue. So now we will move on to our, if my clicker goes, our legislative update. So as Beth mentioned in last month's board meeting, the governor has put into his budget 3 different positions at the CPUC to focus directly on CCA issues. So that is, there are 2 high-level staff analysts and 1 temporary 2-year administrative law judge. And the governor has put these 3 positions in the budget, the CPUC has asked for them, and the Senate subcommittee has approved these positions, and that was done the day of the last month's board meeting. The Assembly subcommittee that can approve this will meet on May 7th. So we'll have better information for you in another 2 months. And then it will go to the full Senate and the full Senate and Assembly budget committees. So we still have a little ways to go on this. We are doing some grassroots advocacy around this with different partners, and I believe Beth gave you a list last month of all the organizations we've had sign on. It's been really exciting to work with our partners all throughout the state. The rest of these are bills that we are monitoring, so I'm just going to run through them really quickly. The first one is an effort to get Clean Power SF off and running. The second is a little bit of a mystery. No one has seen the language, but we know it will affect CCAs somehow. No one is quite sure how, but we're monitoring it every day. We're getting updates and we're checking in, so you'll probably hear something next month about it. The third bill asks this commission to start a proceeding to set forth requirements for on-bill repayment for tenants in multifamily units. Right now, the statute only allows for on-bill repayment for landlords of multifamily units, so they wanted some parity. So that's a bill we'll most likely be monitoring. SB 699 was brought on by the attack on the PG&E substation in the South Bay, the sniper attack. So this bill aims to require the utilities to have a safety plan in place for attacks or other events like that. The last bill, I apologize, it's actually AB 2661, not what is written on there. And that modifies the conflict of interest rules about who can be appointed to the California Energy Commission. So right now, if you work at a CCA, you can be appointed, and under these rules, you may not be able to be appointed. So there go all of our dreams of grandeur. My future career plans, surely. All right, moving on. So now we're going to do a quick, hopefully very simplistic, I shudder to say with John Alessi in the room, overview of the PCIA. So as this chart, I'm sure, is extremely familiar to all of you on the board. And the part we've circled is the added PG&E fees. most of those PG&E fees are attributable to the PCIA, the Power Charge and Difference Adjustment. So if you bear with me, and John, if you could just shut your ears, I'm going to make a very, very simplistic analogy, because I'm a lawyer, that's what we do. Most of you are lawyers, we can all analogize. But everyone, not just lawyers, love burritos, right? Like, so this is my analogy. So every Friday, I go to my local burrito joint and I get a chicken burrito. And every Friday I go religiously, I get my chicken burrito. They know me, I know them. It's a good deal for everyone. Let's say a new chicken burrito joint opens up down the block. And they're cleaner, they're more local, and I don't know.
Cheaper.
Yeah, cheaper.
Better burritos.
Clearly we have more burrito fans in the audience.
They let you special order. They're allowed in the beans.
Okay, maybe the burrito analogy was a little too far. So when I go to the new burrito joint, the old burrito joint says, wait a minute, I've already bought all these burrito ingredients for you. And I say, well, sorry, I found something better. They say, well, I have a solution. I'm going to charge you the difference for what I can sell this burrito on the open market. And so those ingredients are essentially the PCIA, the Power Charge and Difference Adjustment. So you can maybe unplug your ears now. All right, so keeping this...
Exactly correct.
That's the highlight of my night, John. So keeping this sort of rough analogy in mind, we're going to turn to the actual scenario and some of its complexities. So unlike burrito joints, utilities are required to procure for their customers by law. So by law, utilities have to get the power for their customers. Since the energy crisis, that's just the way it is. But utilities also have a mix of short-term and long-term power agreements. So when customers depart, the utility has what they call excess power. But the power could be used in their basic power supply when they fluctuate from year to year. So for example, in a drought year like this year, they're pretty low on hydro. So they could use that power for the power they're not getting from their hydroelectric facilities. So utilities could sell this long-term power on the open market, but sometimes they choose to keep it. And so departing customers, which is CCA customers, we pay the difference between the contract price and the fair benchmark price of the power. And so that difference is the PCIA that's on the bill every month for all of our customers. So there are some interesting policy implications.
Can I ask a question on that, though? By definition, it's really a legacy charge, right? So over time, theoretically, the reason PG&E would have to continue to charge that difference should go down, right? I mean, we're now in existence. We can project out, they can project out. So is that how it's designed? And then ultimately, what's the time horizon for the legacy charge?
Yeah, so basically that's the way it's designed, but the way it's being implemented, it hasn't really shown to be that way thus far, and maybe John can help me out with the technical pieces of when they phase out. But whenever PG&E signs a new contract, like some of them are 25 years, and then they re-up them later. And so there's no sort of calculation about CCA customers when they re-up their contracts, and they're re-upping them a lot. And what's interesting, and I'll get to this in a minute, is that when someone moves, the PCIA value that they're assigned, their vintage, it gets reset every time you move. So if you move more, if you move at all, you're going to keep getting your PCIA reset over and over to your latest date. So it won't fall off. It'll just remain. So that's something I'll get to in a moment. But John, do you have anything to add?
No.
So the policy implications, are interesting. So if I was a utility, why would I procure less power if I'm getting paid money every month through the PCIA? There's no incentive for me to do that because I'm getting paid on the front end and the back end. The PCIA discourages competition. It creates a barrier to entry for communities who are interested in CCA because communities don't want to deal with unknown and volatile exit fees. I mean, who would want to do that? It also penalizes CCA customers. So the issues with this are numerous. Our customers are paying for energy they aren't even using. I mean, and that's the base problem. You're paying something and you're getting nothing. And that's not fair to our customers. Like I was saying, new accounts also pay the PCIA. So like I was telling Damon, if you move within the service territory, you're assigned a vintage for your PCIA. That is the year that you're assigned your PCIA value. It just gets reset every time you move. And also, if, you know, there's that nice tract of land out here with some trees and some benches. If I decide to build a home right there, I also get charged a new PCIA, even though how is PG&E supposed to project that I was going to build a house in the middle of the dirt? You know, it's kind of, no matter what way you go, they get you with the PCIA, is essentially it. The fee is very volatile. It almost doubled in January. The fees have no end date, although the contracts do phase out over time. And the departing load costs make MCE look more expensive than PG&E, which is something we talk about every single time we talk about rates to everybody in our community. So let's talk about the impact on MCE customers. This year alone, just 2014, MCE customers are going to pay almost $13 million just in the PCIA. So that's not all of the departing load fees, it's one. It's the major one, but it's PCIA. Since the PCIA is a flat fee connected to usage, care households are affected more adversely than non-care households. So care is the discount program that you can qualify for if you have low income, and you can get a discount on your utility bill. But you don't get a discount on the PCIA, so it ends up being a larger portion of your bill than it is for people who are not on the care program. And as we've said before, the time horizon is extremely uncertain, but it's up to 25 years or more. So here are the possible solutions that we've come up with. We can require PG&E or other utilities to plan for future departing CCA load, and hopefully that would diminish the PCIA over time. So steps were taken in a recent CPUC decision to do just that, but they were flawed steps, and Beth talked about that last month. This is an idea that we've floated quite a bit. We've asked for a planned multi-year phase-out with PG&E adjusting their load slowly over a period of years to reduce it to be zero. Another short-term solution is eliminating the PCIA fees for new customers or move-ins within a service territory, and that could actually have a long-term impact if you think, you know, most everybody moves at least once. Mm-hmm. So MCE is advocating for these solutions in a variety of forums. So what are we doing about it? Like I said, we don't take things lying down, right? So the first place we're advocating is at the California Public Utilities Commission. And so we're advocating for better planning of CCA load in the long-term procurement plan proceeding. There's also a possible workshop that we're pushing that resulted from a decision denying our petition for rulemaking. And as you might all recall, that petition asked the CPUC to look at PCIA, CAM, a number of issues affecting CCAs. They basically denied the petition outright, but they said, oh, you might get a workshop on PCIA out of it. So once they put that in writing, we're not letting it go. At the California Energy Commission, Martha has been really helpful and key in trying to get the CEC to incorporate CCA load into their 10-year forecast. So the plan is once the CEC puts CCA load into its 10-year forecast, PG&E can't say, oh, I'm procuring for all these CCA customers. The Energy Commission will say, look, we've already calculated, you shouldn't be procuring for all of these potential CCAs that are coming online. So that's one of our strategies. At the legislature, we're doing a lot of education and meetings with key stakeholders to see if there's any appetite to address those issues. And we're doing a lot of work with our grassroots partners on building community knowledge. And I think what's really important to know is that all of our efforts on the PCIA are focused on building community knowledge. Because the truth is, if everybody in our service territory knew what we knew in this room, the PCIA would not exist. There'd be no standing for it. And we really honestly believe that the most power we can have is with the voices of our customers. So we've been working pretty closely with Communities for a Better Environment, and they've been really great partners. And so hopefully you'll see some movement on this in 2014. So, thus ends my regulatory and legislative presentation. Are there any questions?
Questions? Yes.
Can you go back to the solutions? Yeah, I really don't like number 3. I'll tell you why I don't like it. Because whenever government or agency starts to advocate for better deals for one customer versus another customer, you create an unfairness in the system. And you're sort of advocating for unfairness that's already being propagated upon us. You see that with issues like Proposition 13 and stuff like that. Unless you create a fair playing field for all, you're not advocating in a proper way, in my opinion. I would not choose to do that kind of advocacy.
Thank you. It's really helpful.
In my opinion.
I have a question though. When you say new customers, I was interpreting, or do you mean an actual new customer or someone who's actually built a new home?
Both.
Okay, because to me, if I understand what you're saying with a new customer, but to me, if they're actually building a new home, one that didn't exist before, where you're saying PG&E could not have estimated that that was going to be on board, then I think that should be considered, because that's separate from someone just becoming a new customer in an existing home, as well as the people who then move, who've been a customer for 12, or as many started from the very beginning, should not be penalized. So I would separate it by those two.
Well, or could you just count the new customers and move it and redistribute the fees evenly to everybody? In other words, continue to distribute an equal percentage to everybody, but not necessarily, but use that as a phase-out mechanism.
Yeah, that would be far fair.
Yeah, so we are exploring phase out. I'm not sure I understand your exact recommendation, but if you want, we can talk about it afterwards.
He's saying the percentage of the money that would not be charged to new customers ought to be spread over the entire customer base, not just given to those particular customers. If I bought, in your example, if I build a new house out there and I'm not paying that PCIA in your advocacy, whereas everyone else in here is paying that, I don't think that creates an element of fairness.
Well, the truth is a lot
Unless
of...
you use that benefit that I'm getting over a broader period, over a broader scale.
Yeah, and that seems like we'd be more working with the methodology of the PCIA, and that is an option we have considered. So I think that's helpful input for the future, and I think once we start getting traction on more of these, you'll begin to see a little bit more of this fleshed out.
Just one question.
Yes.
First of all, it became really clear to me, this issue, so thank you for presenting it.
Burritos.
So well. That was good, but I like the rest of it as well. Does MCE use professional lobbyists in Sacramento to push this issue? Because sometimes the grassroots communities, having done a lot of this kind of stuff, grassroots community people are not taking this seriously, and they should be. And so I'm just wondering, professional lobbyists who has access to some key legislators to really push this issue, is this something that we've done?
Yes.
Yes.
We've been working with a firm for many years, and we're very happy with the work.
Oh, good.
I hardly go a day without talking to our lobbyists, that's the truth.
Who is our lobbyist?
We work with Emily Pappas, with Levi Pappas, the last name there.
Sadler?
Yeah. Sadler.
Thank you.
Okay. Further comments or discussion? All right, well, great report. Thank you.
Thanks.
Item 13, board member and staff matters for the good of the order.
I do have one.
Dawn.
I just wanted to thank Greg Stefanovich for being here tonight. I forgot to introduce him at the beginning, but some of you may not know Greg, but he had worked with us in our infancy as our municipal council to help us get up and running, and he's helping out in Beth's absence to participate in some of our board meetings. So thanks for coming back for us.
Thank you, sir. Happy to be down here. Enjoyed it.
Absolutely. We're adjourned.